Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Nuff Said Now. AITA for make my husband choose between me and his entitled sister who is demanding money for her family trip? Background. My husband and I have been on multiple cruises and have always gone with first adults only and second with only my side of the family, because we like to travel and spend our hard-earned money on enjoying life. We love traveling but haven't gone since COVID and after having our first child. My husband wanted to take his parents on a cruise for the first time. We told the family about it, and everybody has never been on a cruise, no surprise there, and decided that they want to go too. We said sure, let's convene and choose the best time for everybody. We all settled on a trip more than 11 months out. This gives everybody more than enough time to save and get necessary documents to travel. After dozens of meetings that goes mostly nowhere, where I have done all the work planning, coordinating, and being on phone calls for a long period of time, we are all booked. Cruise check, excursion booked, flights check, hotel check, parking and transportation check. Anxiety from them all not reading or paying attention, to having to handhold adults through the entire process. After all the hassle, we are finally 1 month out. Here's where the frustration comes in. The SAL that was not wanting to go originally, note, everybody but 2 siblings are going, she suddenly decides that her family of 4 are going. The SEL, her husband, and 2 minor kids. Mind, this is the SEL that always does things last minute and shows up late all the time. She has older kids that already booked and are going with too, but she doesn't contact them or any of her own siblings. She blows up my phone day after day about document requirements, cruise fare, flights, hotels and everything else that the family have already gone over. Tell me why she isn't reading any of the info we have communicated in the cruise chat and is asking me everything all over again? I'm not one to say no, but I will tell people to wait if I'm busy. That has got a job and family of my own to care for. She then, after almost 2 weeks of looking, decides they want to book, asks me to look at prices again, and then, when I confirm, has the audacity to question that I have the wrong cruise. Excuse me? I was the one that found then coordinated our group cruise? Why would I not know this? Then wants me to book her family and that she will reimburse me after. What? I told my husband that I have none of their personal info and do not want to be responsible for her family's travel info. He makes it all out to me not wanting to help his sister out because I don't want them to go. Surly. I've spent more time the last 2 weeks on her stuff when she still hasn't made up best mind and he's done nothing. Yet, I'm the one who doesn't want them to go. I've organized this trip for 20 plus people, and the thanks I got was that I didn't want Sil's family to go. All because he didn't want to tell his sister to book her own freaking trip, enter her family's info, and pay due to not wanting to offend her. On top of all this, turns out Sil's one child didn't even have all the necessary documents to board, so we then have to wait again until I's ready to book. Hello, we are less than a month out. We're going to go through this vicious through again when she's finally ready, with less than enough time to do anything else. I also told my husband that I am not going to be babysitting anybody's kids, nor will I be responsible for them. We told the family that we weren't going to bring our toddler this trip, because we wanted time to reconnect for just a few days and be child-free. Also because she is still so young. Knowing my in-laws, they will disregard their children and ignore their kids to go enjoy their vacation. I'm not leaving my child at home just so I can watch others' kids so that they can go have fun. Overall, this is all unfair to me and has given me so much anxiety and frustration. I can't imagine how the trip will actually play out. AITA for letting this cause a disagreement between my husband and I, and for wanting to back out of the trip altogether. OP is not an AH, rather her sister-in-law is an AH for demanding to be included in the family trip and asking OP to pay for her 4 family members. This is totally an entitled behavior. So I would rate OP's SL 2.5, and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Mountain-Tone-3010. AITA for warning my friend about a creep. This post starts with a Minecraft server that myself, 19F, and my boyfriend, 21M, who I'll call Jake, that started a few months back after some friends from us in-person D&D group said they wanted to give the game a try. The idea was that we would invite friends of our own from other groups to fill the servers, and the Minecraft world would be shared throughout all of us, which was a normal enough suggestion. Well, in the search for more folks to fill the server, I came across an old friend, 24F, who I'll call KK, and I had played plenty of games together in the past, so I thought I'd send an invitation their way, despite knowing they had a bit of a history. Eventually, once things were started, I realized that I may have made a mistake in adding them, and decided to talk to one of the friends from my D&D group who I had invited. Let's call him Ron, 22M. Ron was originally intended to join with several other members from my D&D group, though when the server finally started, the only members were myself, my boyfriend, Kay, and Ron. So with him being the only other male member of the newly formed group besides my boyfriend. And given Kay's history, I took a chance to reach out and privately chat with him. For context, Kay has a boyfriend, one which she's been with for quite some time, but unfortunately, she has a tendency to flirt with other guys. You'd think this is a huge issue, which it is, though when anyone has made an effort to tell her what she is doing is wrong, or even tried to tell her boyfriend, she either cuts them off, or he doesn't believe take them seriously. Knowing Ron was single at the time and actively searching for a date, I decided to step in, which in hindsight, did nothing. I let Ron know that Kay was already taken, and that if she were to flirt with him that he should give it no attention and not to reward the behavior, to which he assured me he wouldn't let anything of the sort happen. Believing him was my first mistake. When the two first met, Kay seemed to for once be quiet and kept mostly to herself, though the more they played the closer they got, and I quickly noticed that Ron was actively inviting the behavior I had warned him of prior, building his house in our Minecraft server directly next to hers, mining for her and doing every chore for her, and loudly giggling at all her jokes, just generally giving off all the signs that he was into her. She also was being quite friendly towards him, and while I was never around to see any outright flirting, both me and my boyfriend could tell by the tone they'd use with each other, and the constant giggling and being on the server together at all times, that they definitely were mingling. Eventually, for unrelated reasons, Kay and I had a falling out, one I was not bothered by in the slightest, and was actually quite relieved by, and I thought things would go back to normal afterwards. Things started to fizzle out, and I thought I was finally in the clear. I had even noticed that Ron and Kay were not on Minecraft together in the server as often, which was a relief, though as if out of sheer miserable luck, it happened again. For several weeks, Ron would come to our D&D games and open his conversations with me with OMG Kay and I, or so Kay is doing really well, or Kay is sick, which I awkwardly would give a thumbs up to, as at the time I had nothing against Kay, and saw our falling out as more one-sided from them. Things seemed to ease up as the comments about Kay went from excited quips to Kay still hasn't messaged me back, which I was relieved by once more, as for a second time, I thought it was over, but it still wasn't. Once Kay left Ron's sights, I entered them. It started with subtly pulling me aside from my D&D group during intermissions to look at dice and such around the game shop, but quickly escalated to him pulling me away from the others during breaks to look at dice, buy me items I could not afford, and eventually, being too physical for my liking. I had stated before during D&D that I am not one for hugs/physical contact, and just barely allow the head pats I occasionally get as a joke from the DM, and even that's pushing it. Clearly this went over his head though, as several times he had come up to me during sessions, sometimes even when I was standing directly next to my BF, and would creep his hands up under my arms and pull me into very close and uncomfortable hugs from behind. The times it was near my BF, he was sure that it would happen when he was distracted. This was already miserable enough, as he was a close friend to most of our D&D group, and seeing how dramatic he was with the Kay situation, I knew calling him out even if privately would end hellishly. My case was eased a little when a shop worker from the game store our D&D games were at mentioned to me that he had also been a bit weird with them, which gave me confidence. But the final deal breaker came when Kay finally reached back out. I saw that Kay had reached out, and heard in passing from Ron that Kay had blocked them. To break the ice, I joked to Kay that it was funny that they had blocked Ron, to which they seemed confused and explained that they had done so accidentally during a mental breakdown, and had done so to quite a few people. They told me I could tell him to friend them again, to which I agreed, which is dumb. But at the time, I was quite exhausted, and had only half my focus on the situation at hand. After which I had told Ron that he could refriend Kay. After doing so, he entirely stopped messaging back to Kay again, as I had expected after realizing my mistake. At this point, I realized what a mistake I had made, as I had allowed him to get back in contact with Kay, who has a history of people not caring for her boundaries. As much as I didn't and still don't agree with how Kay acts, I still didn't want her to have to possibly deal with what I had been dealing with. So after a few days, with terrible timing, hours before I had a flight to a week-long vacation, I called Kay. I was lucky enough that she picked up, and her boyfriend was on the background and could hear me. What was what I was hoping for, as I had tried to message him prior, but he never replied. I was in a rush, packing and making sure my house was ready to be left empty for a while. So I didn't really have a script to work off of. But in essence, what I told them was along the lines of, "Hey, I thought I'd warn you guys about Ron. I know this is a bit out of the blue, but it's been a bit weird the way he's been acting and how infatuated with Kay he is. And I thought I'd let you guys know." Of course, with a lot more murmuring and stammering over myself in between. But the message I had tried to put across was that it was a bit off-putting how frequently he would talk about Kay, even with groups who knew nothing without her, and he didn't treat talking about her like one would with a friend. I thought I had settled it there until her boyfriend said something along the lines of, "What's he going to do? Like, if he comes over here in real life, I'll punch him," which knocked me flat on my back. First off, it made me cringe a little, and second, it felt like neither of the two cared or were even trying to listen to me, and I quickly realized they probably just didn't care, so I wished them a nice day and went on my flight. Cut to the day after I got home from my trip. Me and my BF are sick. We had our car towed by some jerks, and we finally got the chance to sit down when, out of nowhere, Ron messages him, "We need to talk." To put the talk short, Ron claims that Kay had told him that I had told her he had a thing for her and got upset, telling my boyfriend essentially that I needed to apologize, to which my boyfriend, who was already incredibly exhausted, had no way to respond to. On one hand, he had not been there for my talk with Kay and her boyfriend. On the other, he has been there as well for all the weird things Ron has done to both me and Kay, and said about Kay. Now Ron is incredibly upset with me, which scares me a bit, and I am under the impression Kay hadn't taken any of what I said seriously, and painted whatever I had told her in an even more impossibly bad light. And now, all in all, I look like a bit of a jerk. At this point, I'm not sure what to do, as Kay is, and has been, a lost cause, and Ron, for now, is still a member of my weekly D&D game. AITA? OP is not an AH for warning her friend Kay of Ron's creepy behavior and his tendency to overstep boundaries. She did all this out of concern for her friend. She did nothing wrong. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for Ron, he is an AH for not respecting others' boundaries. So, I would rate him 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from normal_lifeguard 7590. AITA for my reaction on a romantic holiday. I, 27F, met someone, 34M, 3 or so months ago. And from the jump, he pursued and pursued and pursued. Very affectionate, very intentional. Perhaps it's dumbed to not have recognized it was probably loving bombing. Always would hold my hand. Cute nicknames. Apologies when he pushed me away. Anyway, he was away for a month and invited me to go away with him to a foreign country. I thought it's a bit soon for trips, and I'm not so financially capable. But it's winter. I was excited to spend some time in the sun, and more importantly, connect with him. He has shared that his freedom is very important to him, and does not want to lose himself in someone where his interests are not respected. Fair, same. I also understand that is a boundary, so on this trip, he was very clear he wanted to do some water sports. I didn't budget for this. So of course I was like, please absolutely do what you need to do to enjoy yourself. On the first day of the trip when we arrived at the airport, we were both slightly tipsy and we went to pick the car up. For context, I cannot drive. While the attendant is explaining the car, they mention we need to pay an insurance. So, I'm joking with the guy, who even made a joke about something revealing he is gay, and I'm joking around with him saying, "Okay, now that you are making us pay, then show me your favorite spots on the island." Guy is quiet. But I don't really think of it. At the store, we go to buy some food for dinner, and he basically yells at me saying that I was making fun of him and emasculating him in public because I offered to pay the car insurance. I make way less than him, but I wanted to be clear that I'm not here for his money and wanted to make sure I'm contributing to the trip. Even though prior to the trip, I asked to discuss finances and he said, "Do what you can manage. Don't worry." Now he found a place to go do his water sports. And the second day, he went to test out the gear. On the third, he went for 4 hours and the same yesterday. I love being social, so I spent this time roaming the city, making friends with other couples at nearby tables and/or was reading my book. Thing is, he somehow found a way to complain about the boat driver and then a lost contact so he couldn't see. Valid reasons, but I realized during this trip, he stopped holding my hand, being affectionate, calling me beautiful like he always did. I asked him if he is not a fan of hand-holding, and he said he doesn't mind, but then yesterday said he didn't like it. So okay. Anyway, we got into a huge fight yesterday. I'm a very poor eater, always have been. From the very beginning, he saw that my relationship with food is very picky and challenged. That's just neurodivergence, and my ADHD medicines don't really help. He has never had an issue with this. I shared that I used to struggle with an eating disorder and sometimes still probably have tendencies. As we are getting ready, I suggest we take a shower together to try to connect with him. But I say, hey, my period started this afternoon. We have had before, and the first time I was not interested because it's very intimate. And it was fine. He was caring. Now we start playing with each other, etc. And suggests to try in the shower. He tells me to get on the floor, and I say I'm not going on the floor, so we stand. He loses his and I just tell him, hey, it's fine. The water is probably just overstimulating. The first time he placed a towel. So I was like, we can do the same. Now we go to the bed and and he seems to start getting turned off and he is like, I think it's the blood. And it is more this time. And I'm like, okay? I can't really be a perfect Barbie who always has a light flow. So it gets on the sheets and I panic because they are white and we are staying at an Airbnb and I want to be respectful. Do I get up and start rinsing the sheets under cold water? And he just sits there. I say I feel like, and I would appreciate if he was with me during this. He was like, what do you want me to do? And I'm like, IDK, reassure me, keep me calm. Instead, he just looks so disgusted and sits in silence. So I go to the shower to rinse off, and now I'm emotional because I'm dealing rejection, I guess. We go to our reservation, and he picks the tapas menu. I'm not kidding, I really tried to eat this meal, and I actually ate quiet. Significant portion, he would always say like, wow, you really ate more today, etc. In the car, he says that he paid €70 for me to waste food, and I was like, okay, I'll pay for my part. And he just yells. No apologies for the period thing. Just goes on about how he is losing himself and IDK, honestly. We get to the Airbnb and tells me he is going for a drive and that he regrets coming on this trip. He says we are different, and for him he can eat anything, but he has to keep making accommodations for my eating. And that we are too different, and I'm like, difference isn't bad. The grass is just green where you choose to water it. That was last night. I went for a walk. I can only walk in the nearby town because I don't drive, and this island is quite remote, but I thought I won't wait for him. So I message where I put the key, and he responds with, okay, I'll be back tonight. So 24 hours gone. I'm at the Airbnb now, wondering if I was wrong for coming, if I was wrong to accept him to pay for the trip, if I was to shut down at dinner because of the thing. Anyway, our flight back to my winter city is tomorrow, and I'm alone in a foreign country where I don't speak the language. OP is not an rather her boyfriend is an for his dismissive and unsupportive behavior. OP's boyfriend is a terrible partner, and breaking up with him is the only way forward for OP. There are red flags everywhere. OP need to run away as soon as possible. So, I would rate OP's boyfriend 3.5 out of 5 on the scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now move on to the next story from 5000_hours. AITA for thinking I deserved an explanation for a breakup. I, 22M, was dating this girl, 24F, for just over 6 months. It was the first serious relationship for both of us. We would say, I love you, and things were quite good for a time. She blindsided me one day with a phone call, saying she wanted to take a break. Maybe until her sister's baby was born. Still makes no sense to me. But I think she meant things were a bit hectic at home with her family. She couldn't tell me anything else, and I suggested we at least meet and talk about it, which she agreed and came over. She basically was completely frozen up, not able to give me a word of explanation further. Then she doesn't know why, and she wants to take a break. I basically said, so we are broken up then. And she was only just able to essentially nod. I gave her space for a month thinking she would call. Finally, I reached out asking to talk, and she said we could. She then proceeded to dodge every time I tried to set a time and date to meet up for coffee or just a phone call. She did not answer when I just tried to call her once or twice, thinking we could talk over the phone. No explanation given. I finally asked her if she really wants to meet up to talk to me, and she says she doesn't think she's ready. I really have a lot to get off my chest at this point. I feel like I treated her poorly, and with COVID hitting in the last few months of our relationship, I just felt like I had let things become stale and like we would hang out and have sex a lot. But I didn't put in effort to spend much genuine time with her. Even if she wasn't interested in me anymore, I was not coping well, having got no closure, no explanation, no word at all. I felt like this person I knew just dropped off the face of the planet. We always talked. The fact that she couldn't even answer the phone to talk for 10 minutes hurt and confused me deeply. After all, she said she wanted a break. I'm the one that said break up. Here's where the AITA comes in. At this point, I felt I deserved an explanation, something, closure. Why could she not talk to me on the phone, or at this point, even over text? When I attempt to talk serious over text, she ghosted the messages. I told her I was struggling to make sense of this, and if she could please just give me something. Nothing. My mind was racing with speculation. I felt guilt for not being able to tell her my retrospective on our time together. I felt rejected and abandoned. I kept trying to message and kept trying to call. I would wait a month and then try again. She would say yes to meeting up to talk. I would then propose a time, and she would leave it on read. This happened 2 or 3 times after concrete, yes, we can meet for a walk or a coffee. Like 3 months into this on my birthday, she sent me a text message. Happy birthday. Even my closest friends just wrote on my Facebook wall WTF. I persisted to hassle her and even sent her a few videos, cringe, of me basically trying to show her my tone. I'm chill, I just need some closure. Can we please have a chat even just over text? Nothing. She continues to like my Instagram posts, etc. this whole time. I admit I went a little crazy there. Was I wrong to expect her to talk to me? She said she wanted a break. She gave me not one word of explanation for any of this. No, I'm not in love with you. No, it's not you. It's me. Nothing. In retrospective, actions speak much louder than words, and I feel guilty and embarrassed that I persisted to hassle her. But I still think she could have spared me months of pain and embarrassment, with literally a few text messages when I first contacted her after a month. If she just said, I don't love you, stop contacting me, I would have known where I stood. But nope. In retrospective, I still have no idea if she was ultimately confused, she was toying with me, or if she cared for me so little. She paid it all such little attention. Blocked and deleted her on everything years ago so I could be free of going crazy over it. Thoughts? OP is not an AH for demanding clarity for the breakup, but going desperate is a bit off. As for OP's ex, she is an AH for repeatedly ghosting OP and going no contact with him without a proper closure. As for scores, I would rate OP 0, and OP's girlfriend 3.5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from tattooed_goddess1. AITA for having time away from my daughter. I, 26F, would like some advice on the situation I'm in with 27M, whom I've had my daughter, 4 with. Since August, we tried to start out relationship again after 3 years apart. Everything was going well until October. I started with major panic attacks, the kind where you're on the floor crying, shaking, and begging for it to end. Turns out I had an undiagnosed UTI, and I was pregnant. My panic attacks were non-stop for weeks. I couldn't eat, sleep, or drink most of the time due to the changes happening in my body. Constant trips to A&E, which caused friction between me and my partner. He stepped up and watched our daughter when I was going to A&E, which I am thankful for. I was finally admitted onto the maternity ward to where I had a miscarriage. I was in the hospital for 4 days and felt awful about him watching her, so I gave him all my savings to cover as much as I could, as he kept telling me he's struggling. Once I was out, it was like everything was back to normal, but I am not. I struggle with going outside as I panic. I can't sleep in my own bed anymore. I am constantly in a state of being scared. My daughter has suffered witnessing the panic attacks over and over, and being unable to go out as much as we would. And I'll be honest, I have had way less patience. I was still having panic attacks even though the situation was over. I then told my partner I wanted to go to my brother's for a week 3 hours away, as he could not be with me every night to help with the panics. He gave me so much grief and said I was being selfish with our daughter, and how dare I plan without asking him before I up and disappear with our child. To which I explained I'm only doing it to get help. He also used to excuse to not talk about the miscarriage as I had chosen to go to my brother's house. Once I was back, I was ready to talk, and he told me he wasn't going to talk about the situation as it wasn't needed. To which I got very upset, as I suppressed how I was feeling to wait to talk when he was ready. The only time he gave me affection after this was to come on to me, and I accepted it, as it was indeed affection that I needed in any way, shape, or form. I am still mentally struggling, as doctors don't know if I have Crohn's or celiac disease, and are taking forever to test. Back to my partner, I have begged for affection and communication, but he tells me it's not part of his personality, he finds it uncomfortable to do. I said I just wanted to feel wanted. We kept building more and more stress with these arguments, and over my anxiety, which he says I can control when I genuinely can't. I thought he was done with me, as I don't feel loved or wanted. He replies with one-word answers, and I have to push for conversation, to which he says he doesn't like texting either. So I felt I couldn't win. Come to this week, I had spoken to someone on a platform. I'll say I was being flirty, because I can't deny that. He asked me if I had anything to tell him. I denied out of sheer embarrassment, to which he then told me it was all a setup to see if I'd talk to someone else, and how dare I do this to him after all I've put him through lately. I admitted it and apologized, which I know isn't going to fix it, but I felt so alone, and like he was done with me anyway. In not condoning my own behavior, I know I'm very in the wrong. Nothing would have come of it, as I can't even go outside, let alone meet someone in person. We agreed to then work on it. Come to this Sunday, all I asked in the morning was, "What time are you getting our daughter?" Which he replied with, "I don't need to tell you step by step on what I'm doing. I only asked so I could take our daughter out, as it's very rare we do with my anxiety with my friends." This turned into a major argument, where we both said horrible things to each other, and I refused to open the door when he arrived, as I was very angry and didn't think. He then tells me I'm a cheat and a liar. All I do is lie. I choose to have my anxiety. I'm choosing to not work. I've been milking it all for weeks. I'm a slag and making our daughter suffer because I'm so selfish, and told me to do everyone a favors and myself, like I said I was going to do. I felt very angry at this point and asked a friend to help me drop her off at his, to which I handed our daughter over and haven't had her back since, leaving him with the responsibility of her whilst he works, and I don't. I don't know if it's definitely all my fault, to which I feel it is. And not having our daughter has done me mentally more damage than anything. I don't know how to move forward from this anymore. I love him so much and wanted a family unit for our daughter, and I miss her so much, but I don't feel I can be a good mom anymore either. For context, I have our daughter Monday nights through till Saturday nights/Sunday mornings. He has her Saturday nights/Sunday mornings till Monday nights. And he is currently blocked on everything we are talking via my brother AITA. And can someone give me any advice, please? OP is an AH, but she made poor decisions under emotional and mental strain, and part of her decision was because of her partner's abusive and dismissive behavior. Instead of OP's husband is an AH, and I would rate him 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. AITA for telling my husband he can't be friend with the lesbian he had an emotional affair with? TLTR. Husband had an emotional affair with lesbian friend that started through a D&D campaign. He wants to maintain the group friendships and potentially rejoin the group with her still involved, and I disagree. Story time. My husband, 37M, and myself, 37F, have been friends for 10 years and partners for 5. We recently got married and bought a house for our family. He has younger children, I have none. We met at work, and both are currently still employed at the same job, and share many of the same friends and acquaintances. We work opposite schedules, so we don't get to share a lot of time together. My partner is very shy, an affectionate man, and gentle giant of sorts. He's a hugger of friends and very giving of his kindness and compassion. I suffered an injury a couple of years back that left me housebound for a long period of time. During that time, I discovered Vox Machina, which lead to Critical Role, and a shared interest in D&D between my partner and I. We watched the campaigns together, and I encouraged the idea of joining a group if the opportunity arose. About a year later, my partner discovered a D&D group through co-workers in his department. The Dungeon Master, Xander, 28M, and my partner became fast friends and began spending a lot of time together, working out, doing chores, etc. I encouraged my partner to pursue his new friendships and hobbies because of the joy it brought him. Xander hosted a house party and offered to run a one-shot D&D story so that my partner could finally check out the game firsthand. Most of the other people playing were fellow co-workers and had been an established D&D party for a while. I was present and enjoyed the experience of watching my partner become less shy and dive into the world of roleplay. The group, Xander, Ben, Charles, Serge, and Dolores, invited my partner into the core campaign. He joined with my full support, knowing I wouldn't be able to join or attend because of my schedule. I work AM shifts. I gave him my player handbook, monster manual, and some accessories to carry his growing collection. Months down the road into playing, my partner toyed with the idea of starting a D&D romance with Dolores, 26F. RP relationships are a normal part of D&D from what I gathered, and I knew Dolores and the group at this point. Dolores is a fellow co-worker, and both my partner and I had been acquainted with her for a while. She presents Mask and will passionately tell you that she is a gold star lesbian. My partner began writing episodic retellings of the happenings within their campaign from the week prior. He was very passionate about putting the campaign to page and telling the story of his friends and their journey. The retelling began to include very descriptive romantic scenes involving my partner's character and Dolores's character. Again, I was not bothered by any of this. Dolores is a lesbian, my partner is with me, and this is just a fantasy campaign. He started spending large portions of free time going to parties at Xander's house and other functions the D&D group were invited to. Due to my schedule, I was unable to attend most festivities. However, my partner had my full support and trust to enjoy the social perks of his new friendships. My partner starts asking if Dolores can come over and hang out with us on our days off. We all shared a joy and love of nerd things, and we started hanging out and watching streams of D20 and other D&D-based shows. It wasn't until a few times of Dolores coming over that I started to notice small things that made me uncomfortable. She would sit close to him on the couch and lean into him at first. Then I would catch her placing her hand on his back and running her fingers along his spine. My partner would giggle with her in a schoolboy way, and he would look at her in a way I'd only seen him look at me. Flirtatious, playful. Mind you, I have never had a close lesbian friend, or lesbian friend in general, so I don't understand the culture or behavior. I have always been open-minded and willing to learn from different backgrounds and cultures, so I really was giving a benefit of the doubt that this behavior was normal in her community. I mentioned my concern to my partner about the touching, and he agreed he would talk to Dolores about it. After their talk, he assured me that he and Dolores were just close friends, and they discussed her preferences, and that he was engaged at this point. So I ignored my discomfort when the touching and sitting close together continued. Soon, it became more than hanging out at our home with us on days off. When my partner was not with Dolores, he would be constantly texting and Snapchatting with her throughout the day. So much so that I found myself subconsciously competing for my partner's attention and time. We had maintained intimacy and communication, but I still found myself vying for his time. A few months later, a fellow co-worker outside of D&D approached me and asked how I felt about Dolores and my partner's friendship. She mentioned a concern that others had from watching interactions between the two. My coworker explained that they had come to a party a couple nights prior and were acting very close. I got defensive for both Dolores and my partner and explained that they were just close friends and Dolores is a lesbian. I explained that they were judging something unfairly and I was aware and supportive of their friendship. Respectfully, my coworker agreed and understood my feelings on the matter. Both my partner and Dolores had follow-up conversations with me and assured me they were just friends and people were assuming things. I had no reason to mistrust them, and so I believed that the friendship was close, yet innocent. My partner and I were aware of a girl Dolores was interested in, but hadn't really perused because of various reasons she provided. So we just assumed Dolores was close to my partner, because we were a place of safety and comfort. My partner and I were married at the end of summer. We purchased and closed on our first home after 5 years of budgeting. We were beginning the next chapter in our lives as a family unit. A little less than a month later, my partner asked if Dolores could come over on our day off. I begrudgingly agreed, because at this point Dolores was always around on our free time. If she wasn't, then my partner would be texting or snapping her throughout the day. So I agreed, and Dolores came over like any other night. I left the room later into the evening for a moment, and again Dolores was sitting with my partner on the couch, leaned into him. However, when I came back from the other room, Dolores had one arm wrapped around his bicep, while she was stroking his forearm slowly with the other. I was immediately uncomfortable and angry. My partner followed me out of the room and away from Dolores when he could tell I was visibly upset. While in the other room, I stated, "The cuddling is going to stop. I don't know what that is, but if that is what other people are seeing at D&D and parties, no wonder they were concerned." He agreed and said that he was also uncomfortable, and Dolores had never done anything like that before. He agreed he would talk to her, and when we went back into the room with Dolores, my partner sat apart from her until she went home. The next day, my partner and I discuss what happened the night before. While discussing the matter, he admits to me that he has developed a crush on Dolores, and he wanted to tell me once he realized it was more than friendship. I was crushed. I felt like a cuckold in my own house. I felt like a complete moron for not listening to my instincts in the beginning. I told my partner his friendship with Dolores was over, and he needed to tell her the truth of his feelings for her. Dolores responded by telling him she has had something similar happen in her past, and she was going to step away. However, I also texted Dolores and called her out on her behavior and affection toward my partner. I explained that with all due respect her preference, she certainly was not acting the way she presented or advocated that she was. Dolores responded and confirmed my suspicions. She said she had grown close to my partner and didn't know when the line was crossed, but that she had developed feelings for him. She admitted to knowing she should have set boundaries, but ignored her judgment because she liked the affection and attention she was getting from my partner. She apologized and offered to take a step back from my partner and I, but defended that she and my partner could potentially be friends in the future with the proper boundaries. I understand that he is fluid. However, Dolores knew my partner was engaged, and she had other options to fill that void. More and more information started to present itself after the blow-up and admitted feelings. I came to find that Dolores initiated the touching at least 6 months prior at D&D. She started sitting close to my partner. That turned into setting her hand close to his so they would touch. Then her leg would touch his leg. Then she started holding his hand. Then she started rubbing his back and his leg. Although she initiated this type of affection, my partner went along and enabled the behavior through lack of boundaries. The other party members watched their interactions, and Xander even mentioned concern to my partner, though my partner assured him it was just friendship as well. Dolores and my partner would sit at parties together. They would take breaks and lunches at work and sit closely together. They walked each other to their cars after shifts. So often, in fact, that other co-workers were uncomfortable watching Dolores interact with my partner behind my back. He claimed it was only supposed to be friendship and nothing more. He says he never went into this experience wanting anything other than friends, and I believe him. I truly believe he did go into this situation innocently. He did the right thing immediately after our fight and apologized to the friends he had lied to about he and Dolores. He owned up to his part of the problem. Dolores, on the other hand, did not. She talked to Xander after a month, but I don't know anything about the conversation. I was very angry in the beginning and forbade him from having anything to do with Dolores or the D&D group. I felt betrayed that none of the other party members would be adult enough to notify me of strange behaviors, especially if they had talked to my partner prior, and the behavior stayed the same. I felt Dolores had lied and manipulated her way through a fake D&D relationship to manifest her feelings for my partner into a real-world relationship. I was betrayed for 6 months, unaware these two had an emotional affair behind my back, and I could not trust anyone in the group. I didn't want him keeping any connections available for Dolores to slither her way back in. I am not withholding blame for my partner. He knows he messed up and how he messed up. He is currently in therapy, and I am trying to do the same as well. We recently had another blow-up regarding the situation, which led to a breakthrough in why this all happened. My little sister passed suddenly last year, and I was raised to self-soothe and problem-solve. During my grief, I subconsciously went into self-preserving as I had done many times in my life, when dealing with a traumatic experience. However, my partner is affectionate and giving, and he wanted to support me the way he knew how. I am affectionate, but not to the degree my partner is, and because of that, he felt unwanted and unneeded in my grief. I did not realize I was pushing him away, and I take full responsibility for my part in making him feel underappreciated. Because of this, he found that comfort in Xander and his new friendships. He consumed himself with people that needed him because he had convinced himself I didn't. When I realized I was not processing my grief the way I wanted, I reached for my partner, and he wasn't there. He had grown resentful that I needed him now, and wasn't convinced I was being sincere in my desire for him. He had filled his time with people who needed him. He filled his time with attention and affection from Dolores, and almost used it to show me he was getting what he wanted, and he didn't need me for it. So in my grief, I pushed away and failed to be a better spouse to my partner. I will not make an excuse for my failure in this as well. With that said, I had agreed that once we have fixed things within our own marriage, he could pursue his relationships again with everyone, except Dolores. I said that explaining things opened different perspectives and options moving forward, but they don't excuse certain things, especially Dolores's conscious choice to pursue my partner. My partner, his friends, and his therapist feel that I am isolating him by making them choose between he and Dolores. He wants the option to go back to D&D, even if Dolores is there, so he can prove to me, himself, and her that he's just there for friends and he is capable of setting boundaries. He thinks that, because I don't want him involved with Dolores, I am forcing his friends to choose between him or her. I have explained that Xander and the others can make time for my partner without the need for Dolores to be there. No matter what I explain, plead, compromise, or provide examples for, it is met with resistance because I am making them choose between the two. If he assured me that Dolores was a closed chapter in our book, I would be able to move on without so much insecurity and defense. I've told him this. I've begged for him to let her go. He wonders why I am emotionally flooding and still thick in betrayal trauma when he can't put Dolores behind him because she's a part of the core group. He tells me when would like to think in the future that he can go back to D&D, and regardless if Dolores is there, he can prove it will be different. OP is not an AH for setting boundaries after her husband's emotional affair with Dolores. Here, OP's husband is being unreasonable and adamant. OP is not isolating his husband. Rather, she is trying to protect their marriage, but OP's husband behaves AH. So, I would rate him 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from baked_patat_ho. AITA for expecting my daughter's father to completely cut off his brother and threatening to take him to court for full custody and only allowing his supervised visits. I'm 24F, currently 32 weeks pregnant, and I have a 4-year-old daughter, Gwen. I spent over 4 years in an on and off relationship with Manny, 28M, her father, and ended things a little over a year ago. Manny has struggled with a drinking problem, and by the end of our relationship, he was clear that he had no interest in changing. He put work first, refused therapy, and shut down whenever I tried to address issues or ask him to take accountability. There was no cheating, but the drinking often got out of hand, even leading to one physical altercation. After our breakup, we continued living together for a while and stayed intimate. It was easy, familiar, and he would make vague promises about working things out, which he later changed his mind. I finally left, moving in with my mom, and then found out I was pregnant. Manny again promised to change, so I moved back with him, thinking we could co-parent Gwen, and he'd be there for this pregnancy. Unfortunately, I ended up back in the cycle of broken promises. Shortly after I agreed to move back, Manny told me his brother, Brian, 30M, was relocating from out of state and suggested we all live together. This would include Brian's pregnant wife, Maria, 36F, and his son, Adrian, 14M. Though Brian is Gwen's godfather, she has a special nickname for him, I wasn't thrilled, especially since I knew Maria mistreated Adrian. Adrian had just moved from his abusive bio-mom's home to live with Brian, but because Brian's job keeps him away for days, Adrian was often left alone with Maria, who constantly bullied him. Brian's love for his wife prevented him from standing up to her, so Adrian was frequently subjected to her evil stepmother behavior. Moving in together seemed like a risky decision, but Manny persuaded me that it was a good idea for our family. After Manny's brother, Brian, and his family moved in, things were uncomfortable but manageable until my daughter, Gwen, came to me with a problem. She complained of itching on her privates, which I assumed was possibly because she may not have wiped right. But her next comments concerned me. She begged me to only use a wipe to clean her, not fingers, which seemed odd. I asked calmly if anyone had touched her inappropriately. She told me, using her unique nickname for him, that Brian had touched her. I immediately brought Manny into the room and asked her again, and Gwen specifically indicated the parts Brian had touched. Unsure of the next step, I decided we would stay in our room for the rest of the night, and I'd address it in the morning. That morning, I called a friend who urged me to go to the police. I informed Manny of my plan, and though his indifferent response should have been a red flag, I attributed it to him being in shock. Gwen and I went to the police, where we received a case number, then to the children's hospital for an exam, which showed no physical evidence of severe trauma or penetration, though that didn't necessarily mean nothing had happened. Afterward, we met with CPS, and later, a child forensic psychologist interviewed Gwen. While we waited for updates, Manny acted as if nothing had happened since there wasn't proof, but Gwen and I tried to avoid Brian and his family at all costs. Finally, CPS and the psychologist concluded they believed beyond reasonable doubt the had happened. They explained, however, that Brian likely wouldn't face arrest due to a lack of physical evidence. We began working on getting a protective order, as it was unlikely Brian would face any legal consequences. Yet for Gwen's safety, it was crucial that he and his family leave the house immediately. Manny asked that Gwen and I stay at my mom's for a week to give them time to move out. Despite the circumstances, he continued to interact with Brian as usual, eating, drinking, and socializing with him, while I, at 28 weeks pregnant and recently put on bed rest, was sleeping on my mom's couch with Gwen. Manny rarely updated me or checked on us, and when the week ended, he asked for an additional week, spending his free time at the bar drinking after work. My family was disappointed with how he handled everything. Finally, after 2 weeks, Gwen and I were able to go home, but a discussion about Manny's drinking led to an argument where he dismissed my concerns, asking for more understanding. I tried to be patient, but when I brought up therapy and addressing the relationship issues, he said he felt there was nothing he needed to change, claiming I was too emotional and brought him problems. I realized then it was long overdue for me to let go for Gwen's sake. When I confronted him about continuing to visit Brian, he justified it by saying he didn't want to lose his only family in the state, adding that since Brian hadn't been charged, we really don't know what happened. He then accused me of projecting my own trauma onto Gwen, implying I had somehow influenced her accusations. I asked if he believed Gwen, to which he responded that he had to because he didn't want to lose her, not because he truly accepted what she said. That was my breaking point. With no immediate place to move and needing to switch apartments, I arranged for my brother and dad to help with moving, but Manny instead called Brian and his nephew, forcing Gwen and me to leave until they were gone, not returning until after midnight. Just days later, he went to Brian's house again for his nephew's birthday, coming home drunk well after midnight. The following day, I decided to stay with my mum temporarily, as his ongoing drinking and closeness with Brian made me feel unsafe and disregarded. I told Manny that if he refused to cut off his brother to protect our daughter, he needed to delete all photos of her from social media so Brian wouldn't have access to her. I also informed him he couldn't take her anywhere unsupervised. Additionally, I told him he wouldn't be in the delivery room for our unborn daughter's birth, or have his name on her birth certificate, especially since he had demanded a paternity test. He insisted he believed she was his but wanted proof. I agreed to wait, as the test is expensive and wouldn't be possible before her birth. He tried to reassure me, promising he'd stop seeing Brian, but after years of broken promises, I don't trust him. I have seen notifications on his phone of texts and calls from Brian in the last few days. I fear he'd still allow Brian around Gwen, or even communicate with him if I wasn't there. Lately, he's been pushy about spending time alone with her and has become suddenly attentive, which feels off to me given his past indifference. When I told Manny's sister, she downplayed it, saying Gwen showed no signs of trauma and that Brian had never been accused before. My family agrees with my boundaries, but Manny's family thinks I'm blowing this out of proportion. So, am I the here? I know I'm my daughter's voice right now, and I want to fight for her. My mom thinks I should make it public and let any family with little children that he might have had access to know. I don't know if it is a good idea, though. Please be kind when responding. OP is not an AH for standing up to protect her daughter and setting boundaries for her daughter's safety after credible allegation of child abuse. OP's husband is an AH for refusing to cut off his brother, and his dismissive behavior shows that he does not care about his daughter. As for scores, I would rate OP's X4 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump on to the next story from Lara D to MR Dr. AITA for dumping a friend after the election. I know everyone has heard a different story by now, but I did not want to be one of those people who dropped a friend because they share different values than I, a Democrat, had a very close friend, a Republican. She was raised Republican and never in her life voted until 2020. Now she had a baby with a Democrat, and when they broke up in 2020, she suddenly started dressing the baby in MAGA gear, was going hard on social media about politics, and was gaining a lot of MAGA friends. I thought she was doing this to get under her ex's skin. But even after 2020, and the custody case that gave her sole custody, and the baby daddy was out of her life for good, she was still MAGA. I let it go because we had a Democrat in office, and everything was going well. I had no concern with her because she never really brought up politics to me after the election. Then in 2023, she started sending me these videos of her talking at a podium about kids and I didn't watch the videos, to be honest. I just let her send them to me. She told me she was the leader of the NJ chapter Gays Against Groomers. I was curious, and I looked them up, and the first line on Wikipedia states, a far-right anti-gay group. I asked her about the claim, and she said, not the NJ chapter. We love the gays here. Now, my ignorance didn't let me dive more deeply, and also I was going through many personal things in 2023, so I again let it go. Jump to the day after the election. She calls me exclaiming how Trump won and how America will be great once again. I ask, what part of America was so great, and why weren't the first 4 years he was in office great for you? She can't answer, and just says it was great back then, but it'll be better now. I asked her what she was excited about, and she couldn't tell me not one policy. She was just excited for him to be back in office. She also said, I like my president with a little edge, so he women. Clinton got a while in office. Okay, so I brought up some policies and asked her, are you for mass deportation? Yes. No one who isn't American should be here. Are you against an X for non-binary on passports? OMG, yes. What more rights do gay people really need? The other topics we discussed, like women's rights and tariffs, were alarming. But again, I let it all go. I was determined to stay friends with someone who felt differently than I did. Then, over the weekend, she makes a post searching for a birthday venue for her 6-year-old. Curious, I go into the comments to read what others are suggesting, and one of her MAGA friends suggests a firing range. She laughs at the suggestion and then replies with a photo of her daughter lying down in a sniper-like position, with a Nerf gun and goggles for eye protection. Another friend replies to that photo saying, "That's our girl, pew pew," and the guy responds, "If only they made fictional miniguns for smaller children." Mortified, I messaged my friend privately since I was not going to start an argument with these people on Facebook. I tell her that perhaps she was unaware of this, but here's a teachable moment. "Your post was a bit white privileged and tone deaf." She replied, "You're wild. It's a Nerf gun. No one's gotten hurt over a Nerf gun." So I said, "Funny how you think that since you did put her in goggles for protection, but also, that's your white privilege coming out if you think no one has ever gotten hurt or died over a toy gun." She told me I was overreacting and that she was defending her friend who made the post, but she dismissed my feelings altogether. It made me uncomfortable, and she didn't care. I told her this was the line for me, and I blocked her on everything. I was curious about how far gone she is, so I Googled her name and found many gays against groomer videos, podcasts, and one article I thought was interesting. In the article, she was interviewed and said how she was part of the LGBTQ community as bisexual. My mouth hung open in shock. That article eventually led me to her secret, bisexual mama Instagram filled with anti-gay posts. My friend, who I've known for years, mind you, is not bisexual. She lied about being bisexual to appeal to other gays and try to convince them that certain things are wrong and we should be mad about a children's book that talks about being non-binary, or get angry over an all-gender bathroom, or get disgusted over drag queens reading to children. I think that this time around, it's about whether someone makes you feel comfortable or not. Her hate speech makes me feel uncomfortable being around her, even if she isn't directly saying it to me or to people around me. It still shows her true colors and character. This is who she has always been. And the person she's been with me is the facade. I feel like I made the right decision, but I also feel like I might sound crazy. OP is not an AH for cutting off his friend because of her extreme political views and hate speech. So I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's friend is for such extreme views and hypocrisy, and I would rate her 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. My ex-best friend raped me 10 years ago, and I exposed him during his engagement. AITA? Growing up, I, F27, had a childhood friend, Angie, F27, who was as close as a real sister. We spent entire weekends at each other's place, celebrated family events, etc. From 6 years old till 18 years old. I even lived at her place in 2nd grade while my parents went through a nasty divorce. I learned to speak some Russian, as she is Russian and she learned to speak some Spanish. Needless to say, her older brother and little sister were like a family to me. During our teenage years, she had her 2 male best friends, one whom she started dating, and another one, Nico, now 29, who was Russian as well, whom I started dating at 17. Growing up, I had issues with a heart condition. I won't bore you with the details, but I had to take a lot of meds, but got healthier starting from 16. One didn't have to take them daily, but only when my heart rate became irregular. But then immediately, as it would become extremely painful, my heart would cramp, I would start to hyperventilate. All my friends knew this, Nico included, and that I would black out if my meds got taken with alcohol. I didn't smoke much or drink much growing up as a result, since I was worried about my health, and only did drink at home or in a safe setting. Legal drinking age is 16 here, and I only drank wine or beer if at all. I had my first time with Nico at 17, and when my parents stayed at a retreat 2 weeks later, he came over to have a date night. I did drink 1 glass of wine, but starting having health issues later, resulting in me taking my meds and being unconscious. I was a bit sore the next morning, but didn't think much about it. 2 weeks later, I'm informing Nico that I'm late on my period, and he starts to panic, confessing he had sex with me while I was unconscious. We had it before, so he didn't think much about it. Apparently, he didn't have a condom, but since I was on the pill, he figured it was all right. And he also didn't come in me, but in a tissue. I felt violated and disgusted by myself. I didn't know how to describe this and only told Angie about it. I was an utter mess for a few years and wasn't able to have sex again until 2 years later. I didn't remember any of it, but was too ashamed to go to my mom or anybody else. I didn't think of it as back then. I was too young to really understand what and how I was violated, and Angie told me it's all right, I should break up if I feel bad about it. But we were in a relationship and did have sex before. I broke up with him the following day, and apparently he cried about his broken heart to her. As Nico and Angie were close and hanging out together a lot, they started dating a few months afterwards, and I had to see him every time when visiting her. I told her I'm not able to see him, but she didn't understand where I'm coming from. The contact stopped, and we haven't texted or seen each other in years. I still followed her and her family and saw that her brother is expecting his first child. As I was extremely close with her family, I just commented on the Insta post, expressing my gratitude when he reached out to me. I missed his wedding, but he wanted to ask if I would be interested in joining the baby shower as it's been years and we've been extremely close before. He told me I was like a third little sister. I just asked if Nico will be attending as well, as Angie and him have been dating for 9 years now, and he said yes. I didn't elaborate much, but just expressed that I'll send a small present. He can give me his current address but won't be attending. He kept on pestering me what exactly happened all those years ago, and why I'm not in their lives anymore. Angie told her family I'm not able to see her with an ex of mine, but her brother thought there's more behind it. This is when I think I could be the I told him the truth about what happened back then, and while I didn't know it at 17, I know now that this was and I named it as such. I didn't receive any message back from him, but a few days later, Angie reached out to me, furious. Nico had planned to propose during the baby shower, but Angie's brother is against it now. Having learnt why I stopped the contact, she loves Nico and will stay with him, but by doing so, her brother said she is no longer a part of his life, as he doesn't want his little baby girl in the same family as a... Since then, I've been getting messages from old school acquaintances telling me I should have ignored it and not told anybody. Since I didn't speak up back then, I lost the right to do so now, and am a horrible person for ruining somebody's life over some stuff he did 10 years ago when he himself was a child as well. Am I truly the for speaking up? Update. First of all, I am immensely thankful for all the people who took the time to not only read through my story, but also comment. I read every single comment and tried to respond to as many as possible. It gave me a little bit of hope of compassion for victims of, and also the courage to not cave to the backlash I received. Mental update. Reading all the messages defending my choices on speaking up made me realize how insecure I was on what I am allowed to do and how much I was trying to make it right to other people besides myself. This especially included Nico and Angie. All of you are right. If Nico had changed, he would have apologized, reached out, or tried to make amends in some way, either when word got to him from his brother-in-law or at some earlier point in his life. My former best friend Angie should have been able to feel some sort of compassion if she had any respect for me as a human being, or the time we spent together. Her reactions showed that I shouldn't hesitate on my actions. I went to therapy from 21 onwards and thought I moved on from the as best as I could, but I realized how ashamed I still am, almost 10 years later, about an incident that wasn't my fault at all. I was ashamed to speak up back then, and afraid that people around me would look differently at me. And somehow, I still felt bad about speaking up today, so I trying to own what happened to me now and not apologize for other people's behaviors, especially as they don't even show me respect. What happened since then? I archived every nasty message I got on WhatsApp so I wouldn't have to read them, but would have the proof if needed at a later point. Angie's mom called me the following day of the incident, crying. I shouldn't have answered the phone, but during the 10 years of friendship, I saw her as an aunt, almost a second mom. She always joked that while her children would run around the house doing whatever, I would always take the time to drink a tea and talk with her, showing her more love and time than her actual children. While she said she's sorry for what has been and for what I went through as a child, she couldn't believe that I would ruin Angie's happiness over something like that. With Angie's brother refusing to have Nico as part of the family, and Angie standing by Nico's side, it's divided their family, and she is heartbroken. She has grown to love Nico like family as well, and has known him for nothing more than a considerate young man who she knows will make her daughter happy. It wasn't nasty names or angry talk, just a heartbroken mother who faked to acknowledge my pain and saw the fault in me. Angie's mom tried to get me to apologize or to take it back, but I refused as I don't see the fault in me. With everything that has happened, I believe that Nico hasn't changed and is just hiding it better somehow. He can see how people are standing by him and supporting his behavior so he won't have to change. And that is something I didn't want to indulge. Angie's mom, not even one used the word, and I tried to correct her every time she talked about it, trying to name it for her to understand better, but she would just start sobbing more, and it didn't make sense for us to continue to talk. Angie's mom used to be in contact with mine for some time, and she reached out to her after our talk. I was afraid that my mom would find out, since she's from a more conservative background. We had a long talk, and I didn't get to see her, physically yet. But she apologized for not being there for me or not making me feel like I can talk to her. I tried to calm her as best as I could, but when she asked me if my current partner knows I was used like that, I got angry. She was scared my partner would leave me if he found out, implying it was something that made me less precious or appealing. When she asked me to keep it a secret from our family abroad and in our country, I hung up. She was acting exactly the way I was afraid she would, as if it's something shameful. It was especially hard as I am trying my best you move away from the feeling of shame. She has since apologized, but it's clear that her view of me has changed. I don't yet know how to deal with it, but that's something to worry about in the next few weeks. As some of you suggested, I wrote Angie's brother, Sven, again, and apologized for the mess. But I'm glad that it is out in the open and how proud I am that he's defending his family. I asked if his old email is still working, as I would just send a gift card. He didn't respond, but I got a message from his wife 2 days ago. She thanked me for speaking up and informing them about Nico. There were apparently had a few moments that made her uncomfortable, some jokes Nico made, and in retrospective, she can see why. Sven apparently informed her the moment he got my initial text, and both of them have since seen Angie but not Nico. She refuses to be in the same room or house as him, and same goes to their unborn daughter. Sven and Angie's mom has been at their place multiple times to beg to forgive Nico, and Sven caved a little. Angie and Nico will get married. Sven will attend, but his wife will not. He is allowed in the family, but not in contact with either Sven's wife or daughter. Those restrictions are not for Angie. Sven was suffering trying to ease his mother's worries, and is not able to take a stand and cut them out completely. This is a compromise they made without his wife's approval, and she told me she's trying her best to cut them out of their life indefinitely. She wanted to move back, closer to her family as well, and thinks this is a perfect opportunity, but isn't sure if she can follow through. His wife told me she's terribly sorry for all the issues that came my way, and it has been a lot trying to handle the situation on their side. Sven knows it's not my fault, but he doesn't want contact. It's hard for him to talk or see my name, because even though he knows I'm not the guilty party, in some way I was the bearer or bad news, and he sees me as the start of all this drama. She told me a few times that neither believe I'm the bad guy, they just are tired with everything, and it's just been extremely hard on them. That's all that has happened so far. I am frustrated about how everything came to be. It feels like Nico will just continue with his life without having to be remorseful. I didn't want him to suffer, but I think some part of me wanted to at least receive some kind of apology for all the suffering I went through afterwards. I'm having to deal with my mother and her changed, shameful view on me, and even though I'm happy it's all out, it's extremely hard to stand by my choices. My partner and my best friends both have been my shoulder to cry on during this ordeal. Especially my best friend was enraged for me, and I am extremely grateful to have both by my side. Right now, I'm just emotionally drained, but I'm sure it will be better once a few weeks passes. Update 2. My first post was 3 months ago, and this one will be my last update for now. It is not a good one, but I sincerely wish to leave it all behind me. That includes distancing myself from this Reddit account. These posts helped me let go of my anger, similar to a journal, and I am grateful for all the people who are enraged with me. I hope to open it again someday, with a final happy update. But for now, every little pop-up is a reminder of the anxiety I am still dealing with, and I do not have the energy to deal with this topic outside of my therapy anymore. Short summary for those who don't want to read the old post. Nico raped me when I was his girlfriend 10 years ago. I didn't see it as back then as I was unconscious. Afterwards, I broke up with him. Shortly after, my best friend Angie from elementary school started dating him, and they have been together for almost 10 years. I couldn't bear seeing him and cut the contact with her and her family, with whom I was really close. Her brother Sven reached out to me 3 months ago after I left a short congratulation on a pregnancy picture with his wife. He invited me to their baby shower, and I declined. After a lot of back and forth about him asking me and being suspicious as to why the contact broke off in the first place, and why I refused to be in the same space as his sister's boyfriend, I confessed what happened back when I was 17. Afterwards, his family had a huge fight, with him wanting to cut Nico out of their lives for being a and his mum and sister standing by Nico. I was the scapegoat and received a log of hurtful messages from both their friends and former classmates. They called me out on ruining a man's life based on a childish mistake. Nico was 19 back then, and even Angie's mom reached out to mine. I was left to pick up my life, my mom being more ashamed than understanding, and started therapy again. I removed almost everybody tied to that incident. Sven, Angie, Nico, their family, old classmates, and only kept contact with old classmates who sent me messages of support. Update 3. I work in a very specialized field. To get the proper qualification, it takes on average 6 to 8 years, bachelor, master, and then state bar to be allowed to practice. While it is not very competitive, not a lot of people choose this profession, and it is highly sought after. My current company paid for my master's and my extensive course as preparation for the bar exam, and I have been doing well there. My HR department called on me 2 months ago. Apparently, they have been getting a lot of outside calls from Angie's mother and other relatives, saying I am involved in a Metu scandal and being a liability for the company, as I don't have issues ruining the lives of men. How they could imagine this could change anything I do not understand. I work for a global company. They have known me for years. I never had any issues prior, and quite frankly, they do not care. However, they have been getting frustrated with the number of calls, and apparently even reached out to the police, and the calls have stopped since. Nonetheless, they reached out to me to check on my mental well-being, offering to give me paid leave till it settles a little bit, and offering company-paid therapy. Therapy is covered by my country's health insurance, but it is tricky to get one without waiting time. But I already had my old one on retainer and started going right after the incident. They made it clear that they invested a good amount of money in me and do not wish to lose me. I was ashamed that this part of my private life slipped into my professional one. It started to influence the career I worked hard for years to build, and while my company ensured me that it would not affect the workload and clients I'm getting, word got around, and it was clear for my colleagues that I am going through something nasty, and the company does not want to deal with it. All this stress and anxiety led me to hyper-focus on my work. I took on whatever I could, paranoid that another call would come, and for whatever reason, the company would move me to dead-end department where my career would basically be over. At the same time, I started looking into different companies who would be able to buy me out, as I am tied to my current company for 5 years after graduation. 3 more are left, and I got a management position in a rival company with a huge salary jump. I couldn't be happy about it. I was just relieved I wouldn't get the pity looks from my colleagues anymore. I went to the police with all the hateful messages and the HR protocol with the call history and got a restraining order for Angie's mom. Should she contact my new company again? I have a public LinkedIn. It is needed for my job. At least I have some sort of proof that her words hold no meaning. I got asked if I want to pursue the but decided against it. It would open the whole ordeal again. I don't have proof, besides Nico and Angie not denying it, and quite honestly was afraid of what it would to my career. I did keep contact with a good friend of mine who grew up in the same small town but moved away 5 or so years ago. As we share a Nintendo Switch Online family account, so we tend to be in contact at least once a year for a short phone call, when she has to send me the money for the subscription, and we just tend to make a phone call with updates out of it. Yesterday was one of those days, and the whole Nico thing came up. While she didn't hear it directly, her mom is still living in the small town and reached out to her, asking if I'm all right. She expressed her disapproval about how everything came to be, as she was close with Angie back in the days as well, and remembered how close we were, and how often we spend time together, like sisters. She updated me that 2 months again, Seven's baby girl was born. And while neither Nico or Angie were seen in any of the pictures or stories with the baby, a month ago, Angie and Nico had an engagement party. Both Sven, the baby, and his wife participated and are in the family pictures. I remember how enraged Sven's wife was, and how she told me she herself felt uncomfortable with Sven. Now it is all forgotten and forgiven. Nico's parents own a few houses and gifted Angie and Nico a house close to their home, and Seven and his wife apparently bought a house in the same street. It is as if nothing happened at all. Listening to my friend telling me the updates, I'm honestly not sure if I should have asked her to not tell me anything. I just feel empty and betrayed. Not by Angie, she made her choice. Not by Sven, it is his sister. And at the end of the day, when he asked me what happened, and then didn't have the decency to answer me because he saw me as the one who ruined his family, it was clear that the truth didn't matter. Not by Sven's wife, who has a baby girl, and innocent daughter who she should protect as a mother, even though she told me she would do her best to keep her daughter away from Nico, but just by life. I fought to have it all behind me, just to have this old wound ripped open again 3 months ago when Sven kept plastering me. I got hate messages, but knowing that maybe someone would be hesitant towards Nico when he showed strange behavior made me feel like maybe I did right. Maybe by speaking up, I helped a girl out to not be. My own mother was ashamed of what happened to me, told me I was to keep it quiet so my family abroad wouldn't get to hear it, just for it all to be all good again for Nico. After everything that happened these last 3 months, I truly understand why victims of chose not to speak up. OP is not an AH for speaking up for herself, Rather, I will say she is very brave lady who took stand for herself and exposed a Nico and other who call Nico's heinous crime just a mistake are AHs, bigger AHs. Such behavior needed to be penalized, and the people who support heinous criminals like must be punished. As for scores, I would rate Nico and Co 5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Apprehensive Tip 5133. AITA for wanting to break up with my BF while he's in bed recovering. I am 25F, and my boyfriend is 23M. We have been in an almost 3-year relationship now. We have had our ups and downs like every relationship. But now, after he had a vehicle accident, I am doubting if I should be with him or not. My BF, when he was 18, his stepdad kicked him out of the house and his mother didn't do anything to protect him. He let him live in the streets for 1 month until one of his friends let him stay with them. He suffered after that. The day I knew him, he was in a very dark place. I disliked his mother for the same reason, but not as much as right now. Last year, around September-October, my BF decided to stay at his mom's house because his grandparents had visited and he really thought things were cool with his stepdad already. But my BF was sleeping on the couch when stepdad comes in and tells him to go sleep somewhere else and not on his couch. It caused a whole altercation where the grandpa had to step in. I guess the whole stress grandpa went through caused him to have a heart attack that night. He is well now, but my BF's mom? She's still with that MF. Okay, so fast forward to my birthday, the day of my BF's accident. I received the call he had an accident. I went to the hospital, and I was the first one there. When I saw him, I broke down immediately. His mom called me to see how he was. And well, she got really stressed and started crying more when she heard me cry. Minutes later, she arrived, etc. 3 hours later, they submitted him to surgery, and I overheard her talking with someone OTP, and she said, "I really thought my son was bad, but his GF exaggerated. That pissed me off. He fractured his right side of the body and had to have his femur replaced with a metal rod. Scapula fracture, 3 rib fractures, ankle fracture, clavicle fracture, etc. He also lost a lot of blood. So, my BF stayed 2 weeks in the hospital. Who stayed with him? Me, day and night because his mother couldn't because he had to take his sister to school, which I have sibling also to take to school. My parents don't live here due to their immigration status. His mom started picking fights with him while he was lying in bed, told him to respect his stepdad, and if she wants to, she can bring the stepdad in to see him, and she was telling the nurses how to do their job. So due to my BF's fractures, he had to be moved to the first floor in his apartment complex. I was the one who did all the paperwork to move him and me by myself, moved everything from one building to another. Since they didn't have anything available in that same building, gladly I moved everything. Disinfected also, so everything would be nice and clean. I even bought him furniture. Well, mind you, the day he got released. A few hours before his mother had the keys to the department, and I needed them ASAP because I had other errands to run. He called her to tell her to bring the keys because I needed them. And what did she say? Oh, it's for her? She can wait. That was my damn last strike. I just left my BF at the hospital and went to the gym to work out and let all my stress out. Okay, so that day he got released, and next day I went and visited him. To my surprise, y'all, the department was dirty already and the furniture I had barely bought. Oh well, his little sister had chocolate wrappers all over it and even stained it with chocolate, hospital papers all over, etc. Not even 24 hours had passed by. His mother is the one staying with him. BF's mom also got mad at me because I wasn't going to spend Thanksgiving with him, but I had already planned 1 month before to go to Mexico to visit my parents that holiday. So I ended up going to Mexico, and on Saturday decided to go get some drinks with some friends. Well, around 12:30 a.m., my BF made a whole scene demanding me to go home, calling my friend and brother to also tell me to go home. And my BF started offending me, which me already having all this stress and anger, well, I offended him back. Next morning he started acting like the victim. You offended me, all whining and crying about when he started it. So I straight up told him, your mother that abandoned you can offend while lying in bed at the hospital, and you don't talk to her like you talk to me, but I just went to have a couple of drinks and you offend me like a hoe? I never go out to respect my relationship, but he can go out and have drinks with his friends and cousins? Not fair at all. He started defending his mother, and well, what can I do about it now? I just don't know what to do anymore. I love him, but I did everything I could in my hands in his lowest moments. His mother keeps throwing shade to me on Facebook because of me going out to have a couple drinks, and now she's acting like the victim and telling everyone she has been with her son since day one. And that is a lie. Any opinion y'all have matters to me in this moment. Thank you for taking your time to read. I will post an update soon. OP is not an AH. Rather, her boyfriend and his mom are AHs for their dismissive and toxic behavior. OP's boyfriend should be grateful for all the efforts OP did when he was hospitalized, but his response is really pathetic and unacceptable. As for scores, I would rate OP's boyfriend 3.5, OP's BF's mom 2.5, and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from the names DW, AITA, for telling my sister I can't be around her after she announced she was pregnant. For context, my sister currently lives with my husband and I in our attic. She has for over a year now. We moved in over a year ago in a home that we rent specifically so she could live with us. She moved in with a guy she just met, and he kicked her out after 3 months, and since she has lived with everyone else in our life before, I felt obligated to take her in. Also, my husband and I have been trying for 11 years to get pregnant, had failed infertility treatments, and had 3 failed embryo transfers. We have been struggling with it. We started the adoption process 3 years ago, but due to taking her in, we cannot adopt with her living with us. My sister got engaged recently, and we had been excited to plan a wedding and her future. A couple of weeks ago, she announced to me and my husband that she is pregnant. Initially, I am happy for her cause. She thought she could never get pregnant due to similar fertility issues I have. But the next day, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My sister got pregnant before she's married and lives in my house. They don't live together right now. As someone who deals with infertility, it is tough to come to terms with people close to me getting pregnant. I am super happy for them, but it can remind me that I still don't have my little family. Since this is super close to home, literally in my home, I needed time to process. I seek guidance from my therapist, friends, and mom. They all say it may not be healthy for her to continue living in your house while you process. I know that I can have a hard time holding back my thoughts and feelings, so I agree. It's something I'm working on. This brings me to the conversation between her and I, where I tell her I am struggling with her news and not sure how I can go forward watching her be pregnant and hearing about all the baby things. Not kicking her out, but just being upfront with how to go forward. She gets immediately angry, saying I think she doesn't deserve the baby, that it's insane that I don't think I can even be around her. Needless to say, this conversation did not go as I thought it would. I tried to tell her, I just am hurting and I needed time. He doesn't hear this, just that my pain is greater than her happiness, which was not what I was trying to say. We leave the conversation angry. Days pass and we have a brief texting conversation where I tell her I love her and want her to enjoy the pregnancy, that I do think she deserves this, but it's just hard for me. She and I reconcile, but of course, I'm taking it day to day. I do my best to just avoid conversations around the pregnancy, and we even go to the movies together. We seem to get into a new rhythm of things. It's not ideal, but at least we can go on with life. Well, it is short-lived. 2 weeks after that initial argument, things go south. My husband and I have a child in our church that we have been contemplating bringing into our home to help their grandparents who have custody of them. Because of that, I felt it best that we find out my sister and her fiancé's timeline of moving out. Now, quick note, there are a lot of things on their plate that needs to be taken care of before that can happen for them. I am aware of this and try to be delicate about it, not giving them a move-out date, but just seeing where they are and having them understand that we have a situation that might need them to move out quicker than expected. My husband and I even try to help them find a new place by sending them apartment finds. That was the wrong thing to do. I immediately find out that I don't care and think they are incompetent. I'm accused of being a horrible person that is rude, narcissistic, and manipulative. I have done nothing but make her life unbearable by my snide remarks. I've done nothing but made them unhappy they are pregnant. I could go on, but I believe I wouldn't relate everything appropriately. AITA for wanting my sister out of the house so our relationship doesn't get worse and for having a bad response to her being pregnant. From our conversations, I feel like I've become this horrible person without realizing it. OP is not an AH for demanding some space from her sister. OP's sister is an AH for accusing her of being manipulative and kept on criticizing her. She should understand OP's behavior. OP is just honest and fair in her dealings with her sister. She did nothing wrong. So, I would rate OP 0. As for OP's sister, I would rate her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. AITA for cutting ties with my gold digger female best friend, who was using me to extract money for her expenses. My ex-best friend? I'll call her April, for the sake of the post. And I have been friends since our middle year in high school. For some backstory, we met when we were 14 or 15, and later became best friends, and we were inseparable around the age 15 or 16. We were as close as two platonic people could be. We'd spend weeks at each other's house, call each other constantly, we'd walk together, we'd go out together. It was rare to see us apart. I even got her a job at my former workplace as a teenager, so we could be together there as well. Things were perfect between us. Adult life had been setting in with us, both constantly working and not being able to hang out as often, but we were still close. But everything came crashing down 4 months ago. For context, I was driving home from work one evening when she called me, asking if I wanted to go out for ice cream. I was exhausted as I used to work 14-hour shifts, however. I hadn't seen her in a while and didn't want to miss out on an opportunity to catch up. I went home, got ready, and she came to pick me up the whole car ride. She was just giving me little life updates, and I was enjoying being around her again. Everything was fine until she drove me home that night. On the way, she was telling me about this guy she was talking to and has liked for a while now, and how she'd asked him on a date for the next day, and he agreed. I was super happy for her and encouraged her to let me know how everything went. Over the next few days, we didn't speak much since she was busy for work, but I sent her a message on the night of the date, as it was late, and I expected it to be over so I could hear all about it. She replied straight away, telling me he cancelled and now isn't responding to her, which was upsetting, and I felt terrible. I tried to comfort her, but she clearly wasn't in any mood to talk, so I left her alone. I didn't hear from her for a few days, so I proceeded to message her just saying I loved her, and I hoped all was well. She just left me on read. I continued to message, asking how she was for the rest of September, yet I was left undelivered and opened continuously for a month. Like any person I'd imagine, I got pretty annoyed, and I was very upset with her about this. I tried to have a talk with her about how I felt, but I was completely blown off. My first big message to her, which may have prompted her to get mad at me, which I'll paste down below, but cut some personal details out, was, I understand you ghost people and everything, but at this point you're just making a joke out of me. You don't answer any of my texts, nor read them, or we'll make plans to spend time together, and you say you'll let me know and never do it, just do make sense. I've cut out a bit, but you understand the gist of it. Her response was, I don't want to have this conversation right now. Which just enraged me, and I hate to say it, but I really disliked her in that moment. I decided to wait a few weeks to cool off, and hopefully this time she would be willing to talk again. Yet it was another failed attempt. We haven't spoken since November yet. Just thinking about it gets me upset and so confused. I've sent her another message this afternoon, but I haven't gotten a response. I'll paste that here as well. Please, I just want you to read this, and if you can try to make an effort, just one sentence to answer if you can. I just want to know what's gone wrong because all I know is you were blown off your date and then you ignore me for months. I've tried so many times to talk to you, but you refuse. You fully replaced me, and I don't understand why. You've told me over and over again that you're going through a lot and don't want to talk yet. Every time you've told me that you're always out with someone, I'm not doubting that you're going through something. I've always supported you no matter what. It's just really contradicting on what you say. I don't want you to make excuses to me. I would rather you straight up tell me that I've done something and you don't want to talk to me. It's been literal months of you ignoring me. It sounds really bad to say this, but I truly think it's selfish on what you're doing. Not who you are as a person, but the actions you've done to me. I don't understand what I've done to get this amount of animosity from you. Again, I've cut a few details out, but that's the main idea. I'm currently cuddled up with my cat, waiting for a response. I've spoken to my boyfriend and a couple of mutual friends, and they've all come to the conclusion that she's being unfair, and I should just stop wasting energy on it. But it truly boggles me. Any advice is appreciated, or some outside perspective. Thank you. Update. Okay, this update came a lot quicker than I thought, and I would like to just apologize for not putting some important background information beforehand. This is all very new to me, but in case you haven't read the comments of my replies, I have been financially supporting April for years. but I've taken the advice of a few commenters and cancelled my card. I should receive one in a few days. I've also stopped my direct deposit to her account for her apartment bills. Again, per some commenters' advice, I've stopped trying to get in contact. However, I think some of you were right, as she's now continuously messaging me about cancelling my card, as she's out with friends and was planning to use it and didn't bring her own card. I won't post here what she's messaged me, as it's really awful, and will probably violate the guidelines of Reddit. I've also found out from mutual friends that she's going around speaking badly of me to some people she's out with now, and how I now refuse to help her with her bills, etc. Like I was expected to. I'm not really sure what to take from this situation, but I am now being spammed with calls from her as well. I understand a lot of people have seen me as the asshole. I will be deleting this post and account very soon, considering the majority of the comments were just calling me crazy and obsessive, which wasn't very nice. But I hope someone reads this update and can now understand the full situation. And I'm sorry if this isn't the update you wanted, nor cared about. But thank you everyone for your help anyway. OP is not an AH for distancing himself from his selfish friend. OP's ex-best friend is an AH for being in friendship with OP for financial gains. It is the worst type of being selfish. In this situation, OP's decision to stop financial support for her is 100% valid. As for scores, I would rate OP's ex-friend 2.5 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from _ladies_man_217. AITA. For not wanting to reconnect with my family after abandoning them. My mother and father seem to have the perfect relationship. Married for 19 to 20 years and 4 kids with the same parents, ECT. Well, I'm the oldest, 18M, and we lost the youngest. My mom had all boys BTW. He was born with many health issues, and we were told he wouldn't make it past a few months. He lived to be 4. Those 4 years, my parents focused primarily on him though. I'm not mad, and I understand, but also me and my other 2 brothers felt neglected majority of the time. The only time we got any attention was when we acted out, did something bad, or our grandparents would say something about it. Fast forwards to 2017 when we lost him. Our parents acknowledged they had neglected us and apologized and said they were going to make up for it. But it never happened. Our dad is usually very quiet, always kept his issues private and had a bad temper. But it only got worse and worse. My mom was usually very cheery, but she grew into a depressed slump and decided to stay there and never try and get out. Over the years, I noticed my mom was very manipulative and petty when she didn't get her way. I didn't think much of it till about recently. I'd say 2020-ish. She'd always gloat about how she did this behind her parents' back and tell me about how she was such a rebel. And keep in mind my grandparents, her parents are super religious and old-fashioned. But she would jump on me for the smallest things and point out every little mistake I did and tell me that I need to get over it because she raised boys and not little girls. She also took away our allowances because my brothers never did their chores, and then told us our allowance was having beds and a roof, and if that wasn't enough, we could leave. She also said we didn't need money, and all we had to do was ask, and they'd get it for us. Anytime we asked for anything, she called us ungrateful and spoiled. She was also very overbearing. One time I asked if I could go hunting with my buddy on his land. The plot was 2 miles away from their house with cameras everywhere. She said no because what if I get attacked in the deer blind? A better example is when I asked to go to the homecoming game and she said yes, then found the tiniest reason to not let me go and ground me, and then make a huge story about the place getting shot up. I honestly think I might have spilled some sweet tea by accident. I don't remember fully. Getting more recent and closer to the end. Sorry. When I learned to drive and got my first truck, she told me I'd be paying the insurance and the gas, so for when she said I couldn't go do something with the truck, I could say that I'm paying those 2 things and I can do as I please with it. I thought this was very reasonable, but it didn't happen like that. She'd say that it's in my dad's name, and it was his truck, not mine, and I could suck it up. She also forced everyone to download Life 360, and makes us turn the location on 24/7, even my dad. But she kept hers off all the time, and when I said something about it, she'd respond with, "I'm your mother. You don't get to ask me those questions, it's none of your business." This was also around the time me and my fiancé got together. Our first date, my mom and dad followed me to her house, but sat at the gas station across the highway and then followed us into town to the movies. She timed the movie and then followed us to Sonic McDonald's and then got so pissed off she went to my grandparents, which funny enough we were on our way there too. I take her home and then my mom walks in even more pissed because I passed her house on purpose for like 2.5 miles just to get some more time together. She sits down and tells me I wasn't used to driving a stick shift truck in town and that I put my life in danger because I didn't do what she said. My grandfather taught me to drive this when I was 12, and I had been making small trash runs with it since then. I was very experienced with that truck. Anyway, from that point on, I could tell my mom was pissed because she was getting replaced, and told me that's why she doesn't like her and that I stick up for her and she's jealous. She grew on my mom after 6 months, and then my mom found out we were sleeping together. We were 16 and 17 at that point, and then my mom separated us for 4 weeks. No contact or anything. She also tells me about how she wrecked her '94 Camaro the same night her and my dad slept together the first time. There's a 6-year age gap BTW, and she just told her parents after 20-something years. And then says since I'm a young white male, and she's mixed that if she cries, then I will be in serious trouble. My mom continues to find more and more reasons to not like her after the fact, and pushes her away. She slept in one Sunday and didn't wake up in time for church, and my mom said if she can't be an adult and wake up on time, then I couldn't go to her house on Sundays. Church was a newer thing to her because her mother wasn't religious. Her stepmother was Catholic, 'cause she grew up in New Orleans but doesn't continue in it anymore. That caused my girlfriend to lose her shit, and they had a huge fight. My mom said some very hurtful things about her and her moms, and got mad at her when she had an issue about it. Then her mom said she's not to have any contact with her daughter, and my mom said if she couldn't have contact with her, then me and my girlfriend couldn't have contact with one another, because it was her phones I was using, and on her phone bill, and I was under her roof. That apparently she makes the money for. She doesn't. She hasn't worked since 08. I think 4 or 5 months past of us have a very low-profile relationship, and I saved up for a new truck and had 4 jobs over the summer. I packed all my stuff like the 3rd day into the summer. I packed a few things that night, then the rest in the morning, and went to my first job. They stayed out of my room all day, thankfully, and then I stopped by to grab a few final items, then went to my second job and never returned home. My mom called my work, asking what was going on. I said I made my choice and I'm leaving and won't be returning home ever. I still saw my dad over the summer because my main day job was an internship at his work. We had little to no contact the first few days, but then slowly started back to normal. I really hate that I hurt him so bad, because it was obvious he favored me over the other two and expected more of me. When I told him why I left and what I thought about my mom, he said he agreed that she was controlling, immature, manipulative, and many other things, but because I left and caused her to be so pissed that the situation is my fault, no one else's, and that it won't change unless I fix it. He also told me that he will not answer my calls, text, nothing, until I fix things with her. He'd also say he can't believe I'd do this to my family. I tried having a few sit-downs and talking to them, but my mom just accused my fiancé of things that didn't happen and were never said, and same with me. She was trying to manipulate. She always had to have my brothers there to witness, and she has already turned them against me and tried doing the same with my baby cousin, who we just adopted after she lost her mother. I explained to my grandparents, my mother parents, what happened and my whole side of the story, and they agreed with me and said that's not their daughter, and they definitely didn't raise her that way. They have tried to fix things, and I really do love that about them, but it always ended with my mom screaming and claiming the devil had won. So far, I've had almost no contact with them. My dad shakes my hand like a businessman and says he can't tell me he loves me or my mother will get upset with him. I'm living with my grandparents and slowly, very slowly, finally getting back on my feet. Things aren't perfect, but I'm happy where I'm at, and have learned that to you can't find happiness where you're at, then you won't be happy anywhere. I want to reconnect with them, but I'm not sure, and I'm scared too. OP is not an AH for cutting ties with her parents, and he is justified in feeling hesitant to reconnect with his parents, especially given their toxic behavior in the past. There is nothing wrong in reconnecting, but going in a close relationship might make things complicated for OP. The keeping a reasonable distance from such toxic parents would be a sustainable approach. As for scores, I would rate OP's parents 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AA scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from kindly_preference 819. AITA for breaking up with my boyfriend over his low self-esteem? I, 33F, had been dating my now ex, BJ, 31M, for about a year. For some background, he was the best friend of my friend, Eve, 33F, his fiancé, Demetrius, 35M. We met while I was helping her move into BJ and Demetrius's house. Eve is a nail tech, and Demetrius is a professional dancer. They were both more than able to pay off their parts of the living expenses. This is important. BJ helped me bring some of her heavier boxes in. He was really attractive, and I'm not going to turn down a fine man helping me, LOL. We chatted and ended up clicking. I asked her to give him my number, and the rest was history. I found out after several dates he was an aspiring model who moved to our city about 3 years ago, advance his career. Think Phoenix from Atlanta. I asked him how he was able to afford his part of the rent, which he quickly corrected as his mortgage, off of an aspiring model's salary, and he said some of his posts had gone viral, and he was doing spreads for magazines like Essence. I don't read magazines, so I took him at his word and was impressed. We keep going out, and soon enough, we've gotten to the stage where I start asking Eves about double dates. We're staying up on the phone. I'm staying the night at their house. As we get closer, he starts opening up to me about certain things in his past, specifically what it was like first starting out in our city. I'm thinking this is new ground in our relationship, and I can't help but feel thankful in a way. I know it sounds dumb, and I know we're moving fast, but dating in my early 30s is awkward, especially in my area. So I clung on to BJ once I started feeling that safety with him. In retrospect, that was thirsty. But I was catching real feelings. There are little things he does that make me question him. For one, I'm a full-time healthcare worker and part-time fashion influencer. I do it for fun and don't plan on making it a career anytime soon. I don't even have enough of a following to sustain myself if I wanted to. BJ has tried to convince me multiple times to quit my job and become an influencer full-time. I ask him why, and he just says it'd be right for me. He also has little stints where he won't want to use birth control. Every couple of months, he'll decide we should try. All of it's odd. I keep brushing it off though, because generally he's a great guy. I just won't sleep with him. I'll just tell him I'm keeping my job, the like. Now, about 4 months ago, Eves and Demetrius got engaged. She and I have grown closer over the past year, so I am over the moon. We start prepping for the wedding instantly. You would have thought it was in a week how we were acting. BJ does not seem as excited. He's happy, but not ecstatic like someone watching their best friend of 3 years getting married would be. A month afterward, he's driving home after we left their house. All of a sudden, eyes still on the road, he asks if I want to get married. I ask him if this is a hypothetical question. He says no. I ask him why he's proposing right now. He gives a vague answer about it being that time in his life, and how it's a new step he wants to take. I ask him if this is because of Eves and Demetrius, and he says no, seeming almost offended that I would ask. It's going to sound blunt, and maybe I'm able to be this blunt because it's over, but even if I had wanted marriage at that point, I couldn't see him being fully committed to it because he's so inherently self-centered. BJ is undoubtedly capable of loving, and I do or did think he loves me, but he's also one of those people where they'll put everything, feelings, whims, even well-being, aside from that one main goal. And BJ's was achieving his dream of superstardom. I don't tell him all of this, of course, but I do tell him I can't accept his whatever this was. The car ride home is awkward, and so is the next week, and the next week, and the week after that. We end up at a standstill. We're not broken up, but we're not close like we were before. In early November, I tried inviting him over so we could work things out. We slept together, but there was no real resolution. This is where we get to my current dilemma. I want to say 2 weeks ago, Eves and Demetrius break up. According to her, BJ became more passive-aggressive towards them both after the proposal, and every time she brought it up to Demetrius, he would defend him. This led to lingering feelings about him bending to BJ resurfacing. She said something nasty, her words, about their financial situation, and their engagement imploded. She doesn't tell me what that means. Eve was renting an apartment before moving in with them and needed time to find a new one. I offered to have her move in with me. and now we're sharing a room. Week after she moves in, I start feeling sick. I'm thinking it might be PMS, then I realize I haven't had my period in a while. I go to the corner store and take a pregnancy test in the bathroom. It's positive. I'm freaking out because I don't even know what terms BJ and I are on. He could have a whole new girlfriend, and I wouldn't even know. I keep telling myself not to stress because it's bad for the baby, but that makes me stress worse. Eves is also stressed. In the days after moving in, she becomes more and more jaded towards her ex. Little things about their relationship end up trickling out, including how protective he is of BJ. I always ask her to expand on it, but it's like she flips a switch and drops it. I come back from my night shift, and I hear her arguing with Demetrius on the phone. She hangs up, storms into the kitchen, and starts to rant about him like always. Except this time, the longer she goes on, the angrier she gets, and she ends up finally telling me about him, BJ, and the truth. Now, when I said, and thought, BJ kept his appearance up, I meant him wearing lip balm, oiling his beard, getting pedicures. Normal things a man does to make sure he looks good. Apparently, he did not just do this. When he first moved into the city, he would couch hop with people he befriended, steal their money, and use it to get extreme amounts of surgery. When I say extreme, I'm not being prudish. I don't mean, like, Botox or a nose job. He is completely, unequivocally, unrecognizable from 3 years ago. He and Demetrius met because Demetrius was his personal trainer, paid through other people's savings. BJ threatened throughout their friendship if he ever told others what he looked like before his rejuvenation. He would implicate him for the robberies. She didn't call them robberies. And from there, I'm guessing Demetrius developed some sort of Stockholm syndrome. Hearing this, you probably won't be surprised to hear he lied to me about pretty much everything else. He wasn't some up-and-coming model. He posted on an Instagram with botted followers. All of the covers and spreads he posted were edited by someone off of Fiverr or something. He didn't own the house and let Eves and Demetrius stay. Demetrius used the money from his days as a personal trainer to buy it and moved BJ in because they were friends. The financial situation was he and Eve paying for all of the living expenses. BJ contributed nothing. His name isn't even on the deed. He didn't meet his new post-robbing kind people friends from art galleries or industry functions or whatever other fancy event he fabricated. They were all people who got him to his current appearance. His second closest friend, right behind Demetrius, was one of his former surgeons. His name isn't even his name. If I'm calling him BJ, let's say he told me it stood for Bryce James. It was something outlandish like Bojangles. Eves herself didn't even know any of this until the last few weeks, when BJ was particularly nasty towards her, and she couldn't seem to understand why Demetrius was so relaxed. They went back and forth until he finally snapped and exposed everything. I'm speechless. I don't even know how I stood up as long as I did. I feel violated, horribly, horribly violated. A year of my life was wasted on the idea of a concept of a person. Time I can never get back was spent on a man whose name I don't even know. And not to say I chose to keep my baby because their dad's hot, but I'm not even sure what our baby's going to look like now. I also have this queasy feeling about those conversations around my job. Was he trying to get me to quit so he could be half of some fancy couple? Just so he could say he was some big model with this big influencer girlfriend? And did he propose because he thought it would look good at this point in his career to be a family man? Is that why he pushed for kids? If he wants to be a different person, fine. But it feels like I was robbed of every decision. I call BJ over the next day. I can barely look at him. It's barely any him, anyway. I scream, I yell. I tear into him so he can feel even 1% of the hurt that I did. He tries to explain what his reasoning. At no point does he apologize for anything. I keep yelling at him. He says, talking to me is tiring, and goes to leave. BJ slams the door off of its hinges, and that sends me over the edge. I chase him back to his, probably Demetrius' truck, and yell insults at him as he gets in. Eve pulls me inside and tries to calm me down. I started posting on Instagram, trying to expose him. He doesn't have a real following, so it kind of goes nowhere. I blocked his number. I'm thinking of filing for a temporary restraining order so he can't come near me. I never want to see him ever again. I certainly don't want him around my child. The pushback I've received from our group is insane. Our mutual friends think I'm cruel for treating him how I am. I think they're on his side because he paid their bills for years. But what do I know? The only person who's been able to comfort me is Eve, because even if she didn't experience the extent of what I did, she knows what it's like to deal with them. Am I the for breaking up with my boyfriend over his self-esteem? OP is not an AH for breaking up with her boyfriend who lied about every aspect of life. OP's decision is perfect for her and her child's well-being. So, OP is not an AH for breaking up with her boyfriend, and I would rate her 0 and OP's boyfriend 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. AITA for thinking my 29M GF 28F is change-averse and affecting our relationship. My girlfriend and I have been dating for 3 years. I need to preface this by saying I have ADHD. I have a lot of the usual ADHD issues: being late, poor emotional regulation, strong sense of rejection sensitivity. Now, as our relationship evolved, I have noticed that I actually listen to my girlfriend and make changes so that the ADHD doesn't get in the way and doesn't upset her. I make more conscious efforts to be on time, and I take my meds to make sure I'm emotionally regulated when I'm with her. We're also from 2 different cultures. She is American, and I am Indian. I have put in significant effort to understand her interests and hobbies and cultural references. Of course, this also helps me understand American culture better as I live in America, so the reverse might not be as appealing for her. As time went on, I've actually ended up liking her hobbies so much I do them by myself. Like I bake and do embroidery, even when I'm just hanging out by myself. Also, we live apart, and I am the one who is always commuting to her place. She has a dog, and my building doesn't allow dogs. This has certain emotional, logistical, and financial costs associated with it. Like, I need to Uber to hers all the time. I don't have time sometimes to grocery shop and cook, so I'm forced to buy food outside. Now, my issue is I feel I am the one who's always having to put an effort creating a version of myself that my girlfriend likes. For example, I have told her multiple times that I enjoy doing gym physical activities with her, and like it when she takes an interest in my culture. But she doesn't really do these things. I'm also significantly fitter than her. She's not overweight, but also not at all toned, and works from home, and sometimes doesn't leave her house for days, besides walking the dog. On the other hand, I run marathons and look very conventionally attractive. The few times we did go on a run, I found it very hot, and we had amazing right after. So, when I say that I'm losing my attraction for her, it's not just purely physical, but rather the idea of seeing someone just sitting in their sweatpants all day working on the computer is not very appealing. I think this is one of the reasons our life has taken a nosedive in the last 12 months. I've hinted at why this might be, and her suggestion is that I should take ED pills. I already take medication for my ADHD, and the thought of taking annoys me. Like, why can't she make a change that would reinvigorate our life? She is also very weird about money and effort. She keeps tabs a lot on who paid last, and makes sure she's not getting shortchanged. When she does something, she also records that as a major effort, and makes sure to mention that. I don't do these things because I think it's exhausting, and reduces relationships to a form of debt exchange. Like, sure, there needs to be equal effort, but I feel she only looks at the efforts she makes and expects reciprocity in the exact same way, and turns a blind eye towards the things I do for her. Is this a cultural, or a gender, or social thing? I think a lot of these problems are because she is extremely change-averse. It's really hard to get her to see different perspectives apart from the ones she's set with. She goes to therapy, but I'm convinced that her therapist is the world's worst therapist. Her issues have not abated over 3 years, and her therapist is against medication to improve mental health. I feel all the changes for the better and emotional labor go primarily only one way in this relationship. I'm sure she doesn't see it this way, which is part of the reason I'm here. I want to better understand how I can help by A, girlfriend be less change-averse. B, think about this situation differently for myself. I feel if my girlfriend is this change-averse, then a cross-cultural relationship where we have different values won't work out. My perspective on relationships is it is something you actively wake up and work on and listen to your partner's needs and wants, but hers is a more romantic ideal of something that just happens, and I feel she is increasingly unhappy and thinks to some extent that I am what happened to her LOL. AITA for expecting that my GF needs to be less rigid and put in efforts for me and our relationship within the context mentioned above. OP is not an AH for being concerned about his girlfriend's efforts in their relationship. In this case, OP's girlfriend is an AH for not putting any efforts in the relationship. The relationship doesn't seem to be working in the long term. As for scores, I would rate OP's girlfriend 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from XX Co-Cock AITA for sending a screenshot of a paragraph he sent to me, confessing his feelings to his ex out of jealousy. I, F16, liked a guy in high school. When I first saw him, I told my friends he looked like a cartoon character and was updatable because he was dating one of my pretty friends, Rory, at that time. However, when the new year started, we were in the same class. He sat beside my best friend and was friendly and chatty, so I thought he had a crush on her. On his birthday, when I wished him saying, HBD hope, you get your Rory just because IDK, it was the first time I ever talked to him, and he started asking questions about my ex because we were all in the same class, and my ex was his best friend in kindergarten. He said whatever, and a few days later, he texted, so you don't text first? Eventually, we became best friends, and I started liking him. He had already broken up with his girlfriend Rory, and I even helped him try to get back with her with all the best relationship advice earlier. So one day, I told him, and after 2 days, his ex Rory told a common friend of ours that I liked him. I thought the only way she could know is if he told her. I broke the friendship, saying I didn't want to be involved in that drama, and he said he didn't tell her anything but had met her. Prior to this argument, at the start of this friendship, I told him I could set him up with my best friend Sandy. After many months, we started talking again because he asked for some notes and started flirting. He confessed that he liked me too, and I agreed to confess face to face because I didn't want to say, I like you on chat. I had never moved on from him because he was my best friend, and he never judged me. But then came the cricket tournament. He said he missed me when we didn't text, and I was kind of rude to him because I was still not over Rory, who was still on his Snapchat and had contact with him. We didn't talk for a week, and I couldn't text because we had an argument. But when I turned up to practice for cricket, he was there with Sandy, laughing, and I felt jealousy as she had already tried stealing my boyfriend in the past. So on the second day of practice, he talked to me very rudely and even took Sandy for a ride on his scooter because she had cried. He consoled her by holding her hand and making her laugh. They took more than 15 minutes to reach a place 5 minutes away, and that day, he kept his hand on hers again. I was never the overprotective or over-jealous kind of person. Not that it's bad, I'm just kind of like my mom. So, I stopped talking to him, and when he texted for a get-together, he also said he wanted to clear stuff out with me. I replied, wouldn't your girl mind? And he said, what girl? He said my best friend wasn't his girlfriend. He didn't come to the get-together as he was very tired, and the next time we met, he didn't talk to me and left. I watched him like a puppy. My heart had already been broken when he took her hand to comfort her. I blocked him and cut all contacts, and he noticed within an hour. He texted my other friend, let's say Darla, that I needed to hear him out. I agreed and unblocked him. He sent me a whole paragraph, and I eventually agreed to meet him alone. I don't know why, but one night I just said, there's no point in clearing stuff out, and he replied, Kay, I cried that night. I'm so embarrassed to say this, but I texted him again to clear stuff out again. And he eventually agreed. The first time we agreed to meet, he couldn't show up. The second time I was busy. With all the emotions in me, I was like, God, I will meet this guy at any cost, even though I knew God was against it. He didn't show up, and thankfully I didn't reach the destination as he didn't pick up any of my calls. I blocked him again, and he texted me on WhatsApp, saying it was because a surprise text happened in his class, and his mom wouldn't let him leave. I cried that day again. We didn't meet up to clear things up and became kind of friends, I guess. He texted me that he missed me and started sending romantic reels or whatever, and wrote paragraphs. I replied, still doesn't change the past, and even said that you've given me a chance in the past, all I'm asking for is a last chance. I saw my self-respect that was already on the ground, crippled, and never texted him back. But one day, we were in the group chat, and Darla made a sticker of a bunch of girls, including Rory, and a guy in the center of them all, making fun of the guy because he looked gay. So he sent that sticker to his ex, Rory, and she started dissing us. Even though the sticker wasn't even about her, she said, how about I make a sticker of you and that guy, her ex, and write one-sided love, and then tell you that it wasn't even about you. This hurt my ego. I'm very self-aware. And I sent her a screenshot of a paragraph that he had sent to me, and even blurred most of it. I confronted him because I felt that he might have told something to her, but he denied. I felt like and regretted sending that screenshot to her. He confronted me, and I apologized. When my birthday came, he wished me and said he couldn't write a paragraph because he hated getting his paragraphs leaked. I said, fair enough. A month later, we were seated next to each other, and I still hadn't moved on from him completely. On the last day, accepting all we had been through, I smiled and started being happy independent of what others did or what he did, like talk to Sandy. I gave him a smile and later texted him, I'm glad it ended in a good way. He replied, yeah. I wasn't entirely happy with his reply, but looking back, I always had a hopeless, melancholic feeling that lingered in my heart about the possibility of him and me. But that day, I didn't feel that. I feel I still miss him, but it's all right. I will eventually stop missing him, but I did truly love him. I hope that one day I entirely move on from him. Also, give me some advice if you can. P.S. I even vented out to AI about him and made AI make a list of all the red flags. OP is not an AH for moving out of a toxic relationship. OP's boyfriend is an AH for being prioritizing others over OP. OP's reaction is 100% justified. She did nothing wrong. OP has the right to protect her emotional well-being. So moving on is the best option. As for scores, I would rate OP's boyfriend 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story. From mental_gymnast_. AITA for ghosting a friend for feeding into a psychotic episode. Me and Ron got into a bit of an argument about me sleeping over at Jade's house after we had been drinking. Me and Jade went to the bar together, and Ron showed up part of the way through the night and left about 20 minutes later. He tried to come pick me up, but I sent him home. When I got back into Jade's house, we ended up talking about the situation a fair bit, and that's when the episode started. I started to think that Ron hated me, and that he was angry that I was friends with Jade. I talked about this with Jade because we always talked about everything. I feel like it was pretty obvious that I was in a delusional episode, because I always start talking fast, zoning out, looping back to the same topic, and getting overly fidgety, and this definitely wasn't an exception. Jade always could tell when I was getting delusional within seconds of the episode starting, but this time, instead of talking me down, they started to feed into it. They told me that they saw him watching us in the bar, hiding in the far side of the bar, and that he only came over to talk to us after Jade spotted him, which immediately flung me into full-blown paranoia. I started getting false memories of him, and thinking that he was violent and cruel, and Jade only backed this up saying, I've known this for a while now, but I didn't want to tell you because you wouldn't have believed me. They told me that they were pointing things out over time, trying to get me to realize what was happening, and that they were glad I was so easy to manipulate, or they wouldn't have ever convinced me. The more we talked about it, the worse it got. They started saying that Ron was cruel to me whenever I spent time with them and my family, and I ate it up and started creating memories of this happening. I became more and more convinced that he was trying to isolate me, and as the night went on, I started to think that he was actively stalking me and that he was planning on killing me. I would get scared at every noise and ask Jade to help me check the house to make sure he didn't break in, and barred the bedroom door. We even started saying things like, wow, we must be tired. This is crazy. We're delusional. And wrote everything down on a piece of paper because I thought he had my phone bugged. The next few days were only worse as I started to think that everywhere he had been was bugged. My room, my car, everything. I spent a lot more time with Jade because I was scared. But the more time we spent together, the worse the delusion got. It got to the point where I started telling people that I was in danger, and that if I disappeared, it was Ron. I said this to my father, who thankfully is used to my episodes, 4 friends, one of which was also Ron's friend, and Jade's family. I still spent some time with Ron, but I was terrified of him. I was trying to make sure he didn't think that I knew about what was supposedly happening. Me and Jade spent hours planning escape plans. They even tried to convince me to cheat on Ron. This was towards the week mark of the episode, so it was starting to wear off, and I finally started to regain my grasp on reality. I slowly stopped talking about it, and spent more time with Ron and was less scared of him. But in total, this episode lasted over 2 weeks. I ended up telling Ron about what happened, and he was furious at Jade. He also knows about the fact that I have episodes, but he was pissed at Jade for making it worse. I didn't want to stop being friends with Jade, but over time I started to realize that I couldn't trust someone that would feed into my delusions. I slowly stopped talking to Jade until I finally just blocked them, and I thought it was over. I still hate myself for believing all that, and I wish I never told anyone about the delusion, but thankfully, nothing ever came of it. The friend of Ron's I talked about it, even cut off Jade before I did, and still talks to both me and him, but I still feel horrible because it could have been a lot worse than it was. This was months ago now, and I wasn't going to post about it, but Jade has now started trying to contact me through our mutual friends, as well as posting about me on their social media, saying things like how they want to cut that head off, calling me a and a cunt, and that I need to unblock them and explain why I ghosted them. I never explained this to them, but I feel like it's pretty obvious. Our friends seem to be taking Jade's side, but I'm scared to tell people about what happened because 1, I don't really want everyone knowing how bad my psychosis gets, and 2, I really don't want to provoke Jade. I've considered the possibility that maybe Jade believed this as well, and we just happened to both have an episode at the same time, but they have never had a delusion as severe as that as far as I know. And it also seemed extremely intentional in retrospect. Them basically bragging about the fact that they were manipulating me for months into noticing what was happening and continuously feeding into my worst paranoias seem pretty intentional to me, but apparently that's not how everyone sees it. I understand that my mental illnesses are my responsibility, but I personally feel like actively feeding into someone's delusions is over the line. Even though everything ended up okay, I feel like I can't trust anyone anymore, especially not when I'm in an episode. So, am I the for ghosting my best friend without an explanation after this? Edit. For added context, I have been in therapy for 7 years and have tried a variety of antipsychotic medications. I just haven't found one that works for me. And yes, I do have false memories, but typically they don't last very long in these contexts and entirely disappear after they're acted on. OP is not an AH for cutting off contact with her friend Jade. OP's friend is an AH for being harassing OP despite knowing OP's medical condition. OP did nothing wrong by ghosting her friend. She did this to protect her mental peace. So, I would rate the OP's friend 1.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Tissaburner 4. AITA, for cutting off my cousin because of her boyfriend. My cousin Meg, 23F, and I, 26F, have been inseparable since childhood. She never had close guy friends, so all the guys she met were my friends, and thus my age. She got into a relationship with my friend Charlie when she was 20, and it ended on a very bad note. I completely cut it off with Charlie for her sake, even though both parties were at fault, because to me, Meg was way more important. About a year ago, she started dating my other friend Ash. Now, at first, I had thought Ash was a nice guy, which is why I was happy for Meg. But over time, I started realizing he was a terrible opportunist and manipulator. Ash got his first job because of my recommendation, and many other career-related opportunities through me. I am very gullible and easy to emotionally manipulate, which he took advantage of. Meanwhile, he had been spreading a lot of about me to others. These people came up to me to tell me about all of this. I have even confronted Ash about these, but he apologized and made excuses about being in a bad place and stuff when he did all that. I never told Meg in detail about Ash's true colors because I could see how in love she was. And what little I told her, she chose to believe Ash. Soon, I started seeing signs of Ash manipulating Meg against me as well. A couple of months back, I broke up with someone I thought I would spend my life with. I expected support from Meg like I had supported her, but she was too obsessed with Ash. Then one day, I found out that Meg and Ash and another couple, our common friends, went on a trip together in which me and my ex were also supposed to go. Meg mistakenly revealed it in a group chat and then instantly deleted it all. I was pissed, not because they went without me, since unlike them, I am single, but rather because they thought they had to hide it from me. Still, I tried making light out of the situation by saying they don't need to hide it because I don't want to be a third wheel anyway. But rather, Meg and Ash started acting like I was butthurt and gaslighting them. Ash started posting indirect stories, targeting me like a teenager, and I got pissed. I had no desire to talk to Ash anymore. But I confronted Meg, telling her that I am hurt by this, and she just went off on me saying, if I have a problem with Ash, I should take it up with him. I told her Ash doesn't matter to me anymore. You do, because you are my blood, and I want to let you know what hurt me. She acted very nonchalant and terribly rude. I supported both of these people when they had nothing and no one. And I helped them solve relationship issues, starting from cheating accusations to meeting the family and all. And in return, I got nothing. Ash tried to sabotage my career behind my back, and Meg turned a blind eye because she was so much in love. I received no apology after that. I did not try contacting either of them. Even Meg put up a few indirect stories targeting me. I never validated anything with any response. It felt weird. I talked to Meg almost every day about everything, and now we haven't been in touch for a month. At first, I was very depressed, but now I don't really care about it much. But some family wedding is coming up, and I might have to see Meg there. I might completely avoid it because of this reason. I am only worried about our families noticing the tension between us because they have always seen us joined at the hips. But I am pretty sure if I revealed all the truth to our families, they would know I am not at fault here. But this might also cause a rift between our parents. So, did I do the right thing by cutting her off? Or am I just not seeing what I did wrong because I'm an a-hole? Edit 1. Meg didn't do anything wrong directly. It's just that I always picked her over everyone else, and I was selfish, stupid, to assume she would do the same. I cut off another really close friend because Meg did not like her, but she did act immature by putting up stories targeting me. Besides, I did not even go to her to vent about Ash. I just told her that she had hurt me by assuming I would get mad at her for going to the trip. My problem was hiding the trip, not going. In this conversation, I just mentioned that Ash has hurt me too. That's when she said to go to him. I never want to make her pick, which is why I cut it off. OP is not an AH for cutting ties with her cousin and her boyfriend. Ash and Meg are highly selfish and opportunists, and they don't care about OP. OP's decision to cut off ties with is very good for her mental peace and well-being. As for scores, I would rate OP's cousin and her BF 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the next story from Never the Right Choice. AITA for not giving him a choice? I, 33F, am 33 weeks pregnant with my first boy and last child. This baby was planned. Our whole life was planned. Due to jealousy and spite and general nastiness, his 32MX, 32F, mother to his current youngest son Priyars, basically gave him an ultimatum. If you stay in the relationship with her, me, and have this child, you can't have a relationship with our son, and you have to have a relationship, co-parenting/romantic, with me, X. This caused my son's father to have a mental breakdown and the end of our relationship when I was 28 weeks pregnant. As you can imagine, it was exceptionally difficult, and the stress did cause issues in my pregnancy. In August, she moved to a neighboring country to her hometown, despite having no support, and at the time, no job or house. After weeks of silence, my baby's father sat me down and began opening up about how she had been speaking to him, things she'd said, etc. And he admitted his fault in it all too. He explained how he felt he couldn't be something to everybody, and he did the only thing so he could be there for all his children, 4 including ours. That I could understand. We came to an agreement we would still raise our son together and be friends. A few awkward weeks later, he came to me and opened up some more, admitting the ultimatum had been issued and that she had tried to kiss him, and that she had in fact had/has a boyfriend for months prior to this, a fact I think despicable. She destroyed our family and has her own boyfriend. And on his last visit to see his son, she screamed and became hysterical when he attempted to defend me as I have done nothing wrong. Since my child's father has come clean and admitted everything that has happened, we have become closer in our friendship and got through a lot of stuff together. It's been nice. However, in the back of my mind, I am always worried. Worried that when our son comes, she will do something heinous to me and our child. Or she will enforce the ultimatum, and it will cause another breakdown. The only way I believe I can help is once our son is born. I ask his father to write our boy a letter, explaining how much he loves him. But he has to leave, and he goes and gives this woman and his other son what she wants. I can raise our boy, and I wouldn't think any less of him. But it's the only way I can see a way out for him. In all of this, I am putting aside my heartbreak and struggles. I am being empathetic to a woman who in one fell swoop preyed on a man's vulnerabilities and broke apart a family and essentially tainted a relationship between a man and his unborn son. A few points before people ask questions. No, he did not cheat on her with me. He left her because there was no communication, affection, or substance to their relationship. She was, in my opinion, coercively abusive and manipulative. He left and got with me. When he did leave, she prevented him from seeing their son for months. When she finally did allow him to see their son, it was on her terms and her terms alone. She allowed her new boyfriend to meet their son, but I have never met him, and nor would I have pushed to meet him or overstep in any capacity. He has said in no uncertain terms, had she never issued the ultimatum, we would still be together, having our baby and getting married, and that I am the person he loves. His choices, according to her, are as clarified. Be single and have all his children. Be with her and have his other son. She already put a wedge between him and his older two. That Wave spent a lot of time trying to repair, and that would be undone. Or be with me, have 3 of his 4 sons, and nothing to do with the current youngest. I am not a choice. I will not be considered a choice, and I have never and will never force him to choose. AITA, if I just remove myself and our son entirely? Update. I have mentioned removing myself and our son entirely from the equation, and his response was, "That's not something I want to think about right now. I'm trying to live day by day." That is more confirmation of what I need to do, but I still feel terrible taking that choice from him. OP is not an AH here for trying to protect her unborn child from ongoing emotional manipulation by her partner's ex-wife. OP's partner's ex-wife is an AH for trying to strain the relationship between OP and OP's husband. As for scores, I would rate OP's partner's ex 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Gold-Net-4632. I'm the bad one for not giving a gift according to the cost of the wedding. I was invited to a wedding, I confirmed my attendance, and they sent me the itinerary. When I checked it, I saw that I was only invited to the ceremony. I asked the bride, "Hey, so I'm only invited to the ceremony?" She said yes, that was correct, since the reception and catering were more intimate. She explained that the guests at the party were selective, because it was going to be in an amphitheater. I said, okay, that was fine. I was really excited to go to this wedding. It would be held in a little town that looked medieval, like an ancient Mediterranean village. My brother asked if I had already made the reservation, and I told him no, because the bride hadn't told me I needed to book it. The bride wrote to me, apologized, and sent me the link so I could make the reservation myself. There was less than a month left, and this place usually requires reservations 2 or 3 months in advance. I told my boyfriend, and he said if I didn't feel comfortable, I shouldn't go, but if I wanted to, he could go with me. We could rent a villa nearby, I'd attend the ceremony, then return with him, and do other activities. I told this to the bride, and she said she wanted everyone to stay in the same place because she didn't want any complications, and reminded me that my invitation was without a +1. I told her that what she was asking was unreasonable, because they hadn't blocked a spot for me when they made the reservations. Also, you're only inviting me to the ceremony. Not that it's not valuable, but your wedding is a destination wedding. I can't just go back the same day, so what am I supposed to do while everyone is at the wedding? She responded, okay, do whatever you want. I thought about it and wondered if it was worth going. The trip would be 5 hours, traffic permitting. The villa we found was inside the complex but far from the ceremony site, and since it was last minute, it was one of the most expensive. I swallowed my disrespect and decided not to go, without drama. I haven't been to many weddings, but I know that when you confirm, you're supposed to give a gift. I googled how much is reasonable, and in several places, it said that $50 is the minimum. That's what I deposited into the account on the invitation. The wedding passed. My brother told me the bride was upset with me for not going, and that it was rude after confirming. I told him I had deposited her gift. I told my brother I deposited $50, and he laughed. I think he thought I was being sarcastic or joking. His wife made a bigger drama out of it, or I don't know what she told her sister, because the bride wrote to me, even though she was supposed to be on her honeymoon, and told me I had offended her twice. First, for giving her only $50 when her wedding cost more than that, meaning the gift should have been higher, and I should have considered who she was marrying. And second, for not attending. I told her that with the treatment she gave me, I wasn't going to go. and that I only gave the $50 because I confirmed my attendance. Had I known I was only invited to the ceremony, I wouldn't have accepted to go. She said I was being very rude and classless, to which I responded that she wasn't showing much class by judging my gift. My brother told me that this also made him look bad in front of the family, and that he didn't want the groom to be upset with him, because he didn't want to ruin their friendship. He said that if I was going to be rude, I should have told him, and he would have given a gift in my name. I replied that I could see where his priorities were, and how he was putting other people's feelings above his sister's. I congratulated him on gaining a new family, told him I'd only see him at funerals, and blocked him. I think that makes me the bad one, and I don't think anyone will understand me. My boyfriend is on my side, but he says I'm taking my frustrations out on my brother, and it's not his fault. My brother was my favorite person in the world. OP is not an AH for not attending the wedding, given the treatment OP received from the bride. The bride is an AH for demanding gift from OP, and OP's brother is also an AH for prioritizing the bride over her sister. As for scores, I would rate the bride 2.5, and OP's brother 1.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. AITA for demanding my husband to kick her mom out of house, or else I would sell the house. My, 29, and my partner, 42, purchased a home over a year ago. When we purchased this home, the plan was to build mother-in-law an ADU in the backyard to have our privacy, as well as so she can have hers. Prior to this, she had been living with my partner for a year or so. That way she can pay off debt and regroup and move somewhere else. Anyways, fast forward to when we moved in. MIL came and saw the house for the first time, and saw that the room she was going to be staying in had its own restroom. She was beyond happy. I was confused as to why she was so happy, since this is supposed to be temporary. Anyways, important information. Around where we moved by there is a mountain, and unfortunately there are a lot of coyotes, hawks, and predators for small dogs. One day she tells me in a panic tone that a huge crow almost tried to snatch up my little Frenchie. I was in shock and checked the cameras immediately. Upon viewing the video, I was expecting my mother-in-law to have a crazy reaction. In the video, I can see a huge crow charge at my dog, and then follow her because it's trying to find a way to pick her up. In the video, my mother-in-law is seen just smoking, staring, and watching this all go down. She didn't get up, didn't yell, just literally continued to smoke her cigarette and stare. This was a huge red flag to me, but I tried to push it aside since that's his mom. I showed my family the video, and the bird is huge. During Thanksgiving, my sister mentioned how big the bird was and how close it was to my dog, where my mother-in-law was confused and asked how she knew or if it happened again. My sister mentioned that she saw it from the cameras. I'm assuming she didn't know I watched or had access or pulled the footage. She immediately had a weird look on her face where she asked me, "Does the video have sound?" I told her it didn't because it did not. She mentioned, "Oh, because I was yelling so hard for Mila." This is a blatant lie. I can see her mouth from the video from 2 different angles. She lied to me, to my family. I pushed it aside because, again, that's his mom, and I was trying to push away negative thoughts. A couple of months in, my boyfriend mentions to me that his plan for the ADU was actually to pull out of the mortgage. I immediately said we are absolutely not doing that, which he understood. A week or so later, I asked how much money my mother-in-law has saved since she's lived with him for over a year, and now lives with us, rent-free, and makes a decent income. To my surprise, my partner mentioned $0. I could not believe that after all this time, she managed to save nothing, and it didn't seem like she had any plans to save for this ADU. At that point, I told my partner I no longer felt comfortable with going on with the plans on building one, since I'm not jeopardizing my home and hard work for her lack of responsibility. I will say when I was talking to my partner about this, I was kind of loud. Well, I'm not sure if she overheard me, but the following week she was giving me the cold shoulder. At that time, she didn't have many responsibilities. She would take my 2 small dogs out to the bathroom and would put diapers on them. One day after arriving home after a long day, I come home to soiled diapers on both my pups. I brought this up to my partner, and I guess he brought it up to his mom, where she then responded back with one of my dogs hurting her back, so that's why she didn't do it. There was so much tension in the house, and I'm someone who hates conflict, that one day she did something that ended up with me having my first panic attack on my way to work, where my hands started to cramp up and shut close while driving. After this happened, I stayed at my parents', since clearly my health was getting affected. My partner said he would talk to his mom. Well, That night she told him that she wanted to talk to him about me not liking her. She said that she overheard me and my friends calling her the B word, not true, and that she has tried to build a relationship with me and that I'm not interested. Also, that she saw us in stuff under the covers. We weren't. He was rubbing my stomach since I was having period cramps. And that she's upset that we took her toilet paper from the garage without asking. My partner knew that at least 2 or 3 things were incorrect since he was there, but the fact that she tried spinning this to her favor and at my house was upsetting to me. During this time, she left for about 3 weeks, which was great. Things were awkward when she came back, but we moved past it. One day she mentioned that she was going to be gone for a week so she can check out some places out of state. I said, okay, and waited for her to leave, but she never went. It almost felt like she never had plans to do this. She was just telling me this to make me feel bad. Time went on, and she was still here at the house, where I complained to my partner again. He then had another conversation with her about what her plans were, and if she needed for us to help her save money by having her pay us rent. She got offended and mentioned she didn't want to live here and that she's been looking but can't find anything. About a month after that, she finally left. She was going to be giving this place she found a try, and big shocker, she didn't like it. So she said she would need to come back, but this time only for 2 months, so she can save and find a place. Keep in mind, during all this time, she never paid rent and isn't able to help out around the house. Unfortunately, also during this time, life happened, and my grandma passed. My mother-in-law gave me her condolences, asked me where my grandma was having her services so she could go, also so she can send flowers. She went as far as to ask me what food I would like for her to bring, and she did none of those things. Now I had 0 expectations for her to do anything. However, when you say you're going to do something and don't follow through, that's where I question someone's character. On the day of my grandma's funeral, my dad passed. Needless to say, this was probably the worst time of my life. I had been missing a lot of work, so I asked my boyfriend to see if he can ask his mom to pitch in since it's getting tight for me. Oh, and also because she's been living here rent-free for months. I forgot the reasoning, but her paying rent didn't happen. Time went on, and a couple of months ago, I complained to my partner again about having his mom pay rent. This time, when he was going to say something to her, his mom somehow beat him to the punch. She was claiming that she was depressed and doesn't feel comfortable at the house. She then asked for an inheritance that she gifted him about 10 years ago back. I was in disbelief. To ask for a gift back is truly distasteful and actually so sad for my partner. Unfortunately for him, he's blinded by love for his mom. His mom does no wrong. So, since my partner didn't want to kick her when she was down, he saved the paying rent conversation for another day. Now I hate to see the bad in people. However, I feel like my mother-in-law says things to make people feel bad for her, because out of nowhere, she mentioned to a family member that she is going to have to move to an even farther state to be able to afford to live. A family intervention was made where she admitted that when we decided no more ADU, she spent the $10,000 she supposedly had saved. When my partner tried to bring up finances because there is no way she hasn't saved, she immediately said, no talking about finances. That conversation went nowhere that day. Even through all this, call me a dum-dum, but I was still willing to make it work as long as she paid a little rent. And when her income drops and she qualifies for low-income housing, she can leave. I bugged my partner again, where I threatened this time that if he didn't tell her to pay rent, that I would have to do it. He didn't want that, so finally, he built the courage to do it, and the conversation went great. She agreed to pay on the 20th, and then again on the 1st. Well, this is what my partner told me. I was happy, and finally, this is going to be a I help you, you help me situation. Well, shortly after the 23rd of this month, I was finishing my workout, and my partner got home and took both my dogs outside to pee-eat. He left them outside since my mother-in-law was smoking outside. During that time frame, my small poodle walked away, and no one was paying attention to him for 11 minutes. My partner said he thought he was safe since she was outside. And coyotes don't usually come that close to humans. She was on her phone, not paying attention, and I'm 99% sure he got taken by a coyote. After that day, I broke. I was angry at both of them for being so careless. After watching the footage, she saw him walk off and said nothing. The very next day, she acted as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't just lose my baby, then looks at my PJs and says, "Ah, those are cute PJs." After that day, I no longer was willing to make it work and immediately wanted her out. Everything, and I mean everything, that was piled in within me to keep the peace just came out and went in the trash. That's when I told my partner that I want my mother-in-law to leave, or we are all leaving because we're selling the house. As weirdly as her timing is, that same day she ended up hurting her knee, where he had to take her to the emergency room. Luckily, there was a Thanksgiving miracle, because the very next day she was walking as normal as she does. He told her on Thanksgiving the predicament that he was in, where she then told him she will leave after the holidays, but that she was also mad. She then said, "BTW, I think she's taking you away from your family, and she holds her nose up high and thinks she's better than us. I have no words, and I want her out, and I'm questioning this whole relationship in general." He's the reason to blame for not setting boundaries and letting it get this out of hand. With that said, AITA for giving him an ultimatum? OP is not an AH for feeling frustrated. OP's husband is an AH for failing to set boundaries with her mom. OP's mother-in-law is also an AH for disturbing the peace of OP's family. OP's demand to set boundaries is completely justified. So, I would rate OP's husband 1.5 and OP's mother-in-law 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from CC Kadaz. AITA for being upset that my twin brother hid a relationship with my best friend from me. I, F16, have a twin brother, M16, and a best friend, F16, whom I've known for years. Our relationship is sweet and lighthearted, and though we don't hang out much, it's nice to have her as a friend. My brother and I have to share a room because we are twins, which is unfortunate, though I don't usually mind it. My best friend has become friends with both of us, and we often hang out as a trio. It's worth mentioning that I also have a partner whom I met in freshman year, and they are friends with both me and my brother. My brother and I are homeschooled online. For some weeks straight, my brother was calling my best friend every night, though I didn't find it weird. A few weeks ago, on November 9th, my brother and I went to my best friend's house to watch a show together for fun. While we were there, I noticed they were being very cuddly, not just in a hugging way, but actually cuddling in front of me and next to me. I didn't say anything about it because I used to cuddle with my friends all the time and figured it was whatever. Soon after we finished watching what we came to watch, they started excluding me from everything they were doing and whispering things while I was right next to them, which made me feel like I was being talked about in a bad way. So, I asked them what it was, to which they said nothing, so I left it. Still, for the next 4 hours, I was being purposefully excluded while they were touching each other, and it felt weird. On the drive home, my brother made it a point to hide his phone from me. Ever since I knew my best friend, and since my brother was old enough to form his own opinion on a relationship, all I've known is that they were completely against the idea of one. Every relationship they tried to be in with other people failed because they couldn't grasp the idea of romance. I didn't mind this and didn't try to push it. That night, when I was being treated horribly, I had the urge to check my brother's phone because I felt anxious about whether they were talking about me and why they were treating me poorly. I told my brother how I felt, to which he said he didn't really care. I also told my best friend, and she assured me they weren't whispering about anything, and if it was serious, they'd tell me. Then I found out about their entire relationship. Needless to say, I wasn't necessarily happy about it, but after some hours, I let it brush over me and accepted it. However, I still wanted to talk to them about it. I gave it a day for my feelings to wash over, and during that day, they found out that I found out. I expected them to confront me immediately, but the next day, my best friend texted me like things were normal. I instead brought it up to both of them, apologized for snooping into their texts, as I understood it was wrong of me, and vowed not to do it again, and we made up. Of course, I wasn't really happy as their apologies were kind of lousy. My best friend said, "You could have just asked me," though I gave her multiple chances to tell me, but I was willing to be fine with it and move on with my life. Until a few nights later, I heard them talking badly about me late at night, saying that it wasn't my business and that it was unjustified, as well as laughing at me being upset about it. Another thing I had a problem with was my brother bringing up my relationship with my partner to try to compare it to his and my best friend's. My partner and I's relationship is queer, and my mother isn't understanding of this. My brother has used it against me multiple times in fights with my mom to go hang out with my best friend. In no way is our relationship the same. If I had known that he and my best friend had anything more than friendship, I wouldn't have been mad about the PDA and how they were treating me, and I might have even helped. At this point, I was angry, as I thought we'd talked it out, yet they were still talking, as if I hadn't apologized at all for what I did, and that they were only hearing what they wanted to. They could argue it wasn't my business, but they quite literally purposefully excluded me when we hung out together, and they didn't even try to hide their relationship, so it was a shocker to me that it seemed like they wanted me to just be regular about it. I confronted them again about how I heard them, and they gave me both heartfelt apologies. Again, I'm willing to leave it here. I had an argument with my brother just the other day about how I wanted him to stay off my phone because I made a promise to do the same to him, and he told me to just change my password. I was shocked because I was asking him to do literally the bare minimum. But still, there's an awkward air whenever I come in from work to hear, "Oh, EJ's here. Say hi to EJ," from my brother. They are constantly on the phone, and it is frustrating. Again, I don't have any problem with them being in a relationship now. However, it feels like I am losing a brother and a best friend. I walk into the room, and he leaves it to talk to her longer. He wakes up and calls her. She does not text me anymore. Though I'm probably just 16 and feel like the world is the worst right now because we're teens, but I don't know. AITA? OP is not an AH for being so concerned about her twin brother. OP's brother and best friend are both AHs, not for keeping their relationship secret from OP, but for mocking OP and for futile comparison with OP's relationship. As for scores, I would rate OP's brother and best friend 2.5 each, and OP gets nothing. Let's now move on to the next story from ThrowRA random name 753. How can I, 27F, support my GF, 28F, of 2 years during her therapy? I, 27F, have been with my GF, F28, for about 2 years now. We're both in individual therapy for some personal issues we'd like to work on during our relationship, so we can both become the best, most healed versions of ourselves. I've been in therapy before, and it helped me a lot when I was coming to terms with my... Unfortunately, I had to quit when I moved away to go and start living with her. Not complaining, I'm very happy with this choice, and I was the one who suggested it. I started my therapy up again a couple of months ago, when I got my ADHD diagnosis. She also has some years of therapy under her belt with different therapists, but it worked a lot less for her than it did for me. A year ago, she started up again with a new therapist, and has been making some slow but steady progress. We are both learning how to communicate within a relationship, although I'm struggling a bit harder than she has. So, now I'm asking you, Reddit, so please give me some advice on what to do about this. Since she has been in therapy to learn and to feel /progress /identify /emotions, all of her past trauma comes bubbling up more often, since her emotions are heightened in this specific part of her healing. I knew this would happen, because I've been through the same thing 2 years ago when I was in such intense therapy. I have been mentally preparing for this period in her life ever since she started going to therapy last year. A lot of times when she has these moments of more intense reactions over usually little things, I've been able to tell myself that the intensity of her reactions or tone of speaking has nothing to do with me or the issue at the moment. I know that she isn't dramatic, and that her opinions and emotions are valid. It's just more intense at the moment. I also remind myself that it isn't exactly fun to be in her shoes. And a lot of times, this worked for me to stay calm, give her space, and when I feel she has calmed down, discuss these things with her. A good 6 months ago, I've noticed that when I came home, aka drove into our parking garage, whether I was happily singing in my car, overall having a great day, or had a kind of day, I became instantly irritated and on edge. I've been thinking about this issue for a while, and think this has something to do with my struggle to hold space for her emotions at the moment. I feel intensely guilty about this. I promised her and myself that I would support me and be there for her during her process, and now I feel like I'm not able to give her that. We go on monthly dates, try to spend a lot of quality time together, go on trips, but I still have this issue with my mood swings, and it's been weighing on me a lot. Can anyone give me some advice on what to do? Update. Hey, as you can read in my previous post, my 27F girlfriend, 28F, is struggling with some things in therapy. I tried to post the update on the original sub, but they sent me here, so here it goes. This is what happened before I made the original post. I promise this is relevant to what happened today. Last week, we had a talk about why she was feeling bad that day. During that talk, she told me that she doesn't think her therapy is helping, and that she feels stuck and on a loop. She also confessed to having thoughts about SH, but not the urge to do anything. She told me very early on in our relationship, she had struggled with SH when she was younger. We talked about options, and decided that it was best she went to the doctor that week to talk about it, aka see if there is an option for any sort of medication or other options that may or may not exist to help her. She also promised me that if she had the urge to do SH, she'd let me know immediately. So, she went and saw her doctor, and after when she came home, she told me that there was nothing to do about it. The day after my original post, I sat down with her and discussed my thoughts and worries. I don't really think she understood that what I wanted to just communicate this to her, and that she has no blame in me feeling this way. I tried explaining it with a metaphor, and she said that she understood. Although I'm not convinced, and think she is feeling guilty for not making me happy enough. She expressed these exact words to me in previous conversations over the last 2 years. Since a couple of days later, we both had therapy sessions, I suggested she should talk to her therapist to see if there is approach to her therapy, and if that could maybe help. The same day she went to therapy, I also had an appointment with my therapist. There we discussed my worries, and we have a plan in motion for identifying, coping with, and communicating my boundaries in romantic relationships. In previous romantic relationships, I've had no emotional boundaries in place. Up until now, I've been the person who carries all the emotional baggage within a relationship. Well, now, another day later, I have been cleaning up our bedroom and instinctively opened a piece of paper that was on her nightstand. This was a printout of an address of a doctor and the phone number of the line. I'm starting to feel a bit worried about her. Could it be that my GF told her therapist and she gave that printout to her? Should I just ask her about this? Or should I just let it be and see if my GF decides for herself to talk to me about it? I really don't know what to do. I know I could be overreacting, but since she told me about her thoughts about SH, I feel like I should be keeping a closer watch on her. At the same time, I want to give her space and take care of my own mental health. Does anyone have advice to handle this situation? OP is not an AH for prioritizing her emotional well-being. OP's girlfriend is an AH for neglecting OP's efforts and care for her. As for scores, I would rate OP's girlfriend 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from Riza Lavu, AITA. For making my roommate find a ride home at night? I'm certainly not feeling good or proud at the moment. To start off, my roommate, 25F, has been living with my husband, 29M, and I, 30F, for the last 9 months, and I have been giving her rides consistently to work, court, and for picking up her daughter. We agreed at the current time to only put gas as the additional expense aside from her rent. Yesterday I told her, after picking her up from work, that I had mandatory overtime for not just that day, but also that week, as well as I would be working till late. Imagine 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. late. I also work remotely. This morning, I said in front of my husband and her that I still have overtime for the week. My dear husband knew it meant he would need to help me with the animals, cats and dogs, at home, and I told her I was working late. I thought she listened and heard me. Big mistake. So, we left during my lunch and break to get her to work. We proceeded with our routine, us talking on the way to her work, and I drive back home to work. I drop her off, get home, and work my regular shift, get a break in between my regular shift and overtime shift, and proceeded to work my overtime. However, that's when things started getting a bit hairy. She messaged me that she's off work when her shift ended, but I reminded her I'm working overtime. I may work from home, but it's still a job, and early departure is double the trouble if done on the scheduled overtime. I asked if she could wait. She said she couldn't. I tell her that I would contact my workforce to see if there was any VTO, but not only did I doubt it, I don't think they would for mandatory overtime for the holidays. She simply brushed it off and said, "Whatever, I'll see if anyone else will take me home." I suggested maybe taking the local transportation, as it was only a couple dollars. It's warm, there's cameras, and the stop is 30 minutes away on foot from my house. She then started messaging me, "Why didn't you say anything earlier? I could have made something up hours ago. Whatever, doesn't matter now." I then replied, I told you literally before we even left. I had overtime today, and what those set hours were yesterday. I told you I was scheduled this whole week. I even said it in front of husband, with him knowing that it meant he would need to take care of the animals while I work. Why do you not pay attention? This went back and forth. She then accused me that I was gaslighting her. I retorted that she was gaslighting me for something she didn't pay attention to. I don't like your condescending tone, she sent. This is where I lost myself and messaged back. Who TF are you to tell me about tone? I'm being nice. I even said my hours in front of husband. Well, I'm not husband. My only response was, you're not, but you were both there this morning before we even left. She only sent an okay, fine. Something was boiling over me and I was fed up. I explained to my husband the situation and requested he tell her that she would need to find alternatives way home. But here's where I start to feel bad. My husband tries to keep things calm, but made it clear he would side with me. She messaged him that her boss called an ambulance as she had a meltdown. And another thing I had recalled was that she was scared of taking the bus. She's never used it before and has no experience with public transportation. She doesn't have a car or license and has compression wraps on her ankle, leg, and for her back, including using a cane currently. I feel like I left someone with a handicap out in the cold to figure it out of high emotions, when she pays gas in her room rent. And now, she's probably in the hospital because of this without a proper warning from me, just through my husband. AITA for making my roommate find a ride home at night? OP is not an AH for setting boundaries with her roommate. OP's roommate is an AH for being ungrateful for having shelter provided by OP. Instead, she accused OP. She did nothing wrong. So, I would rate OP's roommate 1.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye, see you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.